Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators. I'm your host, Nicholas Allen, and my guest today is Billy Delucia, the current Command Sergeant Major of the 1st Special Forces Group. I don't think he needs any more introduction than that. Today's episode is brought to you by the Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley. Precision Wellness Group helps you restore balance, unlock vitality through bioidentical hormone therapy and evidence-based personalized telemedicine. Dr. Taylor Bosley is a board-certified physician, U.S. Army veteran, and a former Green Beret. He knows where you've been, where you want to go, and how to get you there. And he's an actual doctor who can prescribe you actual medicine. So hormone therapy, peptides, TRT, HRT, this is something you've been thinking about for a while now or just looking into, look no further than Precision Wellness Group and Dr. Taylor Bosley. I will have links to their website and socials along with the Sergeant Majors in the show description. I do appreciate you guys. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, pass these episodes along. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Billy Delucia, welcome to Lesser Known Operators, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I do got to say, when I got your message, I went right back to private ward and I'm like, what the fuck did I do?
Yeah.
Because I woke up, I grabbed my phone first thing to see who messaged me through the night, and you're on there, and I want to talk to you about your latest episode. And I went, oh fuck, what did I do? I was right back to being a private in the
yeah, so I had listened to the episode with Ryan Cowley on it a couple of weeks ago. I was coming back, as a matter of fact, I was coming back from a trip out to Bragg. And I knew Ryan. Ryan was in my company. And so, the weird thing was that I was listening to, or rather, I was sitting at the airport and I wasn't listening to it. I was reading the transcript, and so it was kind of hard to follow. But some of the topics that got brought up, and I was like, there are some things that may not be correct or accurate, right? He brought up retention. He brought up, some standard stuff, money, like the things that most Green Berets complain about that we don't get enough of, or these are the things that every year it gets worse. The same things that I was saying when I was in E7, 15 years ago, are the same things that people are saying today. And the difference, I think, and the reason that I reached out and I wanted to ask you about this is, where are people getting their information from, right? So 15 years ago, it was, the guys in the team room, and whatever narrative we created in the team room, whatever message that they heard from the guy down the hall who knew a dude on the B team or a guy up in battalion or whatever, we just echoed that, right? So the circle was small, right? And usually you could dispel those rumors pretty quickly if the command got involved or your team sergeant got, wind of more accurate information, and he would talk about it. But it never really was, the reach wasn't there, right? First group didn't complain about the same things maybe fifth group or seventh group complained about. They complained about the things that happened in their hallway. And so it almost seemed more manageable, right? But now with the inclusion of social media and things like this, I was talking to some folks the other day about it as we were discussing, issues that we're facing in the regiment, right? And I brought it up to one of our bosses, and I was like, I can't compete with Reddit or Instagram right now. Like, I cannot compete with the narrative that is put out there, whether it's accurate or not. And that's the problem, right? And really what I don't want to have happen is guys get information from a disreputable source or somebody who is going off of, their feels rather than, getting it from somebody who, is in the know, right? Because I think it does our guys a disservice. If everybody were to sit there and say, hey, we got less money than we've ever had, it's not accurate, right? But it would dissuade people from wanting to come to this organization. Right. One of the biggest draws that we have is, the access to all the great things that we have. Right. Like we have, we have our Thor programs, we have our mental strength coaches, and among other things. Right. A team of GBs will probably shoot a company's worth of ammo in any given year, a company's worth of infantry ammo in any given year. And that hasn't changed since I came in, right? But if people start saying like, hey, we don't get this anymore, and then, we're going bang, bang, bang on the range, yeah, it's been like that since ever since. But the truth is like things are no worse than they ever were. And I don't want that narrative to get out there because much like you, I care a lot about this organization and I want to get good people to want to come here. You know what I mean? So when I started reading the transcript, I'm like, what is he talking about retention? And like, where is he getting this information from? And I was kind of curious, like, where is this narrative coming from? And it could be that, in Ryan's case, he was reaching back out to guys that, that he talks to still at group, and that might be what these guys are seeing or that's their experience. Honestly, I just wanted to kind of dispel any of those rumors, right? So reached out and asked, like, hey, I'll answer any questions. I don't have any problem with, being upfront about it. If I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you I don't know the answer. But what I don't want is people sitting there and getting their information from, the guy down the hallway who knows a guy. You know what I mean? So,
Well,
and I
since
will
we
say this, in
since
Ryan's case, like the podcast is positive. I put my earbud in and I listened to it on a plane ride. And I always liked Ryan. And when I started reading it and the transcript made more sense as it was a dialogue between the two of you, I could see where it was coming from. And he had a very positive, I think, in retrospect, experience in SF. And I like that. I see that with most of the guests on the show. But like I said, some of the rumors that float around, things like that, that's really what I wanted to get after. At the very least, maybe I could put some information out there that people just aren't aware of, right?
well, since we started right on retention there, the companies or battalions have all dropped a team per company, right? Recently.
So I'm going to generally speak for first group, but yes. Right now we are down 8 companies. So
Regiment wide?
no, just for our group. So 1 per battalion, essentially, with 1 intact, or rather 1 company and 1 intact.
Okay. So yeah, each company is down 1 team. Okay. You said we're down 8 companies.
Sorry, 8. Yeah, no, 8 teams total.
Okay. Where was that decision made at?
It's been a long time coming. So each group kind of, I would say, independently made their own decision on when they had to do it and why. And it came down to, for us, it was a couple of things. And I've been in the seat now for just about 2 years, and we've been talking about it since before I came into the position. And we've certainly discussed it back and forth throughout. And really what the decision came down to is if we didn't sit there and drop the number of teams, the teams that did exist would have so few people that they wouldn't be able to get their job, right? You're talking basically 1 per MOS. And, in some cases you wouldn't even have, maybe somebody in leadership or, a specific MOS. So with that, we said, hey, look, the only way we can combat this is you did 2 things at first group. Like I said, every group took a different approach with this, but I think we were the last one to actually pull the trigger on downsizing, on reduce or removing a team for a company. And the reason was because we couldn't maintain what our MTO is designed for right now, right? Like our growth up to about 6,000 people, we were unable to maintain it with the production that we currently have, right? And this has been a trend since at least the last decade. We have been on a steady decline for a number of reasons I can talk about, but it's just the way that it is. So we said if we're going to continue to make effective teams that can train as an ODA and not have to sit there and like combine 2 teams to go do metal training someplace, we can deploy them independently. We can make sure that they, that they are validated and ready to go and do the things that we're asking them to do. We're going to have to sit there and consolidate people in the remaining 5 ODAs from the one that we ended up, we call it ghosting. And even in some of those cases, it wasn't enough, right? Like we had a team of 7 and we just distributed that across the battalion. or excuse me, we distribute that across the company. You're only getting one, maybe two people per ODA after that, right? So it's not a huge win. But if we waited any longer, we're every year that we go longer without doing this, it just made the problem worse. So if this year 5 teams works, we'd have to go 2 teams next year per company in order to make it work if we continue on this production cycle that we're currently on. So at first group, we took 2 approaches. As one, we realigned our battalion so that if you remember back in the G, how we used to man the organization was we would lean in heavy on manning the battalion that was getting ready to go to war, right? And the other battalion kind of waited until they got more people, or rather until the battalion that was deployed, and then they would start getting all the new guys in, right? Or all the return to group dudes and everything like that. And we just did it in cycles. So the 2 battalions for first group, we predominantly deployed 2 battalions. Those 2 battalions were on a cycle of who was going to get the lion's share of people. So we haven't been able to do that in a while because our battalions were aligned. And what I mean by that is, like, there were some companies that would deploy with their battalion, and then there were other companies that would deploy with the opposite battalion. And it just happened like that, right? Like years of doing this and just being off cycle. So the first thing we were going to do is we were going to realign the battalion so that they deployed organically, and we'll see if that works first. And if that doesn't work, then we would have the ghosting conversation. And we did, and it worked to some degree. But at the end of the day, the numbers continue to decline. It's not so dramatic that it's 10% a year or anything like that, but it's a slow bleed. So we waited too long and just wouldn't have made an impact, not the impact that we wanted to. And so we solicited recommendations from the battalions, and we decided to pull the trigger. I guess it was this summer. And honestly, most of the battalions wanted to do it much sooner. And this was coming from the guys on the ODA. This was coming from the leadership. It just, you're sitting on an ODA of 7 people. And what does that mean is, like, you probably don't have a senior. You don't have somebody who's able to sit there and, like, teach the junior guy how to get stuff in the country, or how to fill the radios after he hasn't done it for a while in the Q course, and get guys up to speed on all the things they have to do at battalion, right? Like just ordering crypto, all the things that you never taught in the Q course. But now they're figuring that out as we're getting ready to deploy with half of the ODA. So the guys were like, I would rather be on an ODA with more people on it, even if we have to ghost a team. So that's where we are today. And I know there continues to be talk of that continuing, right? So it could get worse in the near future.
Would that be on a company scale where they would drop companies, or would they continue to drop teams out of the companies?
So we talked about different courses of action. Dropping a company means losing the structure there. So with a ghosted team right now, we still have the ability to stand it back up if people come back in, right? It's not like we're giving away the equipment or anything. The force structure still exists at growth, which honestly, there is hope that is going to happen, right? We can talk a little bit about that. But ghosting a company reduces force structure in a way that, like, now that's in some cases it would be 3 less sergeant majors, 3 less majors, right? 3 less opportunities for potential growth up, right, at the battalion and the group level. And it's more impactful there than it is at the E8 level, right? Like if you lose a team sergeant and a team leader, which we've always kind of been, like, we've always had just about the right number of team leaders, maybe a bit of a surplus, but with team sergeants, this, a lot of them start out as E7s, right? And they usually get promoted in position. Well, why is that? Because you don't have enough E8s, or those E8s have already moved out of position. So it's not as impactful organizationally as it would be at the company level. So we haven't pulled the trigger on that yet, I guess is what I'm saying. But all these things are being discussed.
That is an option.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like we're spitballing a ton of different ideas, right? Right now we're going through a force restructure where groups are talking about how they want to align. Everybody's a little bit different. That's the one thing is, as similar as we all are personality-wise, we can't agree on stuff. So, but it's good, right? Like, we're not in an echo chamber. We don't all come together and come up with like one brilliant idea that we all sit there and fall in love with. We have discussion and we collaborate. I would say the groups work pretty closely together. I have a great relationship with my peers, to include the guys out at SWIC. Um, so it lends itself to like hopefully coming up with what the best idea that answers the mail for everybody. But as it stands right now, there's a ton of different suggestions going around.
How often are you guys bouncing information off of each other? Is it multiple times a day? Because you guys have got to see similar but also different issues going on at the same time, and then you're getting shit from both directions. So you're getting the battalions, and then you're getting SWIC, whatever they're making up, and one SFC. So how much is this communication bouncing around is actually happening? That because we don't see any of that. You are over at group headquarters,
Yeah,
and
no
we're
one comes
making
up there.
shit up because I said this on the show. You don't know anything about the B team while you're on a team because you
Right.
don't want to. And then
Yep.
you go to the B team and you learn there's 5 other teams. Well, now there's 4, but whatever. And then you learn how they all work together. And then you go to the battalion, and then you realize nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. And so how much communication back and forth is actually going on that we don't see?
So it's tough, right? Like I talk to my peers at least weekly. And then together collectively, we come together once a month and we discuss, the things, hot topics for our relative groups, and then what are things we need to discuss as a red. And so, and then the rest of the time, like, I'm friends with all these guys, obviously. So I reach out and like, hey, are you dealing with this? Are you seeing this? How are you combating it? What are some effective TTPs that you're using and that sort of thing, right? So I talk to these guys pretty regularly. I don't know that that's much of a departure from at least my last couple of years worth of predecessors. I know that, going back to at least Danny Orozco, because I worked for him when he was the group CSM. I mean, he talked to his peers all the time too. Collaboration is the best way to do this. But as far as like being able to get that information down to an ODA, it's a nightmare. So it's easily the hardest thing I do on a regular basis is trying to communicate down to a team. And it's not for lack of trying, right? I used to say this when I was in my background. Obviously, I've been in groups since about 2006. Brendan Hay actually and me were in the same company together and grew up. So Brendan was on the B team,
Shout
and
out to Brendan.
yeah, so Brendan was on the B team. He was a brand new Echo. I was a brand new Echo who got made into a senior, and so I would go to Brendan for advice because he had been there for like 4 weeks longer than me or something like that. So, but how did I know that? And he was right. His senior was a terrible person, but so I would go to Brendan because he would actually answer my questions. But starting back then, I stayed on an ODA for my entire career, all the way up until I went to HRC. And I did a year at HRC. So, 10 years on an ODA, another year in battalion, and then HRC for a year. And while I was there, I learned a lot, right? I learned a lot about professional development and how to take care of the formation and talent management. And I learned it from senior leaders in the organization. I talked to all the group CSMs. Obviously, I had the regimental CSM, USASOC, and then all the GOs. And so all these guys coming together, I was just a fly on the wall. Great opportunity. I recommend it to anybody who has the chance, right? So with that, I came back to group. And I came back as a company sergeant major, and I was a battalion CSM, and now I'm the group CSM. And in that time, since 2017 when I returned, I've done LTDs on professional development constantly, right? I talk about NCOERs, what they're supposed to look like. I talk about the PD model. I talk about, what's a good time in your career to go to SWIC? Where do you want to put people that have, these skills and things like that? Like I take it very seriously, like actually talent managing the formation, or at least I try to. But I give these LPDs on NCOERs more than anything else, right? Because I find that most people just don't understand it. They learn from their mentor that, hey, it's supposed to say this and it's supposed to be written this way. No one's ever actually read an AAR from a board. No one's actually opened the DA PAM. So I said, hey, this is something I'll be able to bring back to the formation. So I would average probably about 6 times a year I do an LTD for any size organization. I've done them for SWIC. I've done them for other groups. And it's all basically the same thing. I adapted a little bit. I'm telling you all this. There's a point. Trust me. And at the end of it, every time I get done with one of these briefs, someone comes up to me, a senior in a team, or somebody at a company, or a sergeant major, and they go, "Hey, CSM, that was good." That's the first time I heard any of that. And I'm like, dude, I've been putting this out now at this point for 8 years. The same information. I have not deviated from what I've been teaching since I was at HRC. And for somebody to tell me that, now in the group CSM, I make people come to these briefings, right? I did the same thing at the battalion, and I continue to get people who come up to me and are like, never heard that before. Like, how long have you been in group? 10 years. Like, I don't know how you have never heard me say this. So I use that as an example, right? Me being very deliberate on how I'm teaching my formation, how to manage this talent, how to write NCOERs and promote the next rank of people. I still can't get that message out. I can't do it effectively enough. The size of the formation is just too big. And so when I say something, it gets distilled down to the operator level, and whatever interpretation it makes down there is something I consistently fight, right? Like, whatever it is. I can't think of the latest rumor, but if I were to sit there and put out tomorrow that, like, hey,
I've gotten one that the company's going to get dropped here in the near future.
yeah, so never said that. But there's some sort of speculation that that's happening. Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I can tell you, like, I've gone down to Channers. I was down on Channers last week, and I was talking to guys, and I was like, hey, what are the rumors, guys? Tell me what you guys are hearing. Is there anything I can answer the mail on, right? And actually, most of the complaints were fairly benign. Things that I could get after, but it wasn't anything like rumor, like significant rumors. Like, I heard our budget's going to get cut by half, or I heard we're not deploying anymore, or whatever. But these are the kinds of things I hear. In fact, in the regiment as a whole, what people are talking about is, are our bonuses going to get cut? Are we going to lose AIP and SDEM? I hear this a lot. Not necessarily from the guys in my group, but I just hear it when I go out to SWIC or when I talk to my friends around the formation. And I'm like, where do you get this from? Like, there's no one's putting this out on a down rip anywhere. No one's putting this out in official email traffic. I've never seen any of it, and I read all of it. So that's the problem, right? Like, somebody heard something somewhere that it's potentially a problem, and then that's where the narrative goes. So when I say the hardest thing for me to do is be able to communicate, it's not for lack of trying, right? Which is why I brought it up to you. I said, if somebody gets on Reddit tomorrow and sits there and complains about the leadership in this formation, or the regiment as a whole, or the policies that we come up with, most of the time where they're getting this information isn't necessarily accurate, or they don't understand the purpose behind it. So if they say, hey, we're restructuring, or we're ghosting ODAs, they come to their own conclusion as to why that is, right? So what did Ryan say, or what did some of the guys say? They said, hey, it's retention, right?
The biggest one that comes out, right, is we're losing 2 for every 1 Green Beret we're making right now. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, the numbers don't align, right? Each group's a little bit different. Everybody's got a different mission in terms of retention, right? But I can tell you this year is probably is going to be the lowest production that we have in recent memory. And I would say that we, just seeing the numbers and being pragmatic about it, we probably will come up with less. Probably, there's a chance that we come up with less than half of what we need to maintain the regiment for its current MTO, right? So, and that's a production issue. That's not a retention issue. And the reason that I say that is because every year they have a production, not goal, but model that says that we have to meet this number in order to maintain currency with the current retention rates based on each group's mission, right? Each group's mission changes too. So whatever that number is, and traditionally it's been about 550 people a year. In order to do that, what do you have to do? You have to recruit people, right? Well, the recruiting mission has gone up I would say significantly since I worked at HRC, right? And the recruiting mission has gone up because the graduation rates have gone down. And we can talk about like why that is, and there's some speculation to that, and everybody has their opinion, frankly. But it's not so cut and dry as like, hey, people are getting out. They don't want to do this anymore. They're disenfranchised. In fact, I was just looking at the stats because I knew I was coming on here, and we're well above our mission for FY25, and I have no doubt that we'll meet mission in 26. And in fact, my group has the highest or second highest mission in the regiment. So we're at 125% for our retention mission for the year. And that's pretty good. I mean, when people sit there and say like, oh, people are getting out, they, like it's not the same or it's whatever, it's like, well, hey, the evidence doesn't support that. And this isn't like it's hidden information that I'm not willing to share, or that the regiment's not willing to share it. They produce it every month, but just like most things that come from a group, it goes right to a trash can probably, and no one gets it briefed to them, right?
We don't listen. We've got our own problems on a team, and the company's got their problems, battalion's got theirs, and you guys are, and as I said before, you guys are off in a different building down the street next to the flagpole, and nobody wants to go over there. And
no, certainly not.
it's not your fault or anybody's fault. Even the company sergeant major says, and he'll say to the guys, because he's the closest senior ranking official before battalion. And he said, he doesn't want to leave the company. And that kind of attitude permeates to the rest of the guys. There's this separation from the company area to battalion, and then there's more separation to group. And there's very little you can do to get around that other than going and sitting in the team room and having a beer with the guys and being a normal fucking person.
And hey, and trust me when I say I wish that was my day. Like if it is, and I'll say this is like, because I'm aware of like my intrusion into an ODA is not always welcome, right? Like who wants the group CSM in there? I get it. And frankly, I think I'm great. Like I would like to hang out with me. I think I'm a lovely person, but I get that most people probably don't see it like that, and that's okay. I go in there and I try to be the least intrusive as I possibly can and ask some questions, and they're always pointed, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, I want to know what they're thinking. So maybe I can help fix things, or at the very least, I can maybe, set the record straight. Like, hey, yeah, we did make this decision, but it's not for the reasons that you think. I can tell you this, like anything that we do is well intentioned. No one's ever sat there and said, you know what? This is really going to screw over the ODAs. Let's do it. You know what I mean? Painstakingly, we sat there and made that decision to ghost ODAs because it was going to have an impact on the formation, right? And anytime we make a decision as it relates to talent management, or, like if we sit there and say that we don't want to send as many people to SWIC this year, that has a second order effect of not as good or not as many instructors at SWIC to teach our guys the things that we ask them to teach. So where's the balance, right? None of these decisions are made lightly, and none of them are made in a vacuum. At the very least, I know that I solicit information, and my peers do the same because they come back with it. It's actually what we use as ammo when we go back and be like, this is what the guys are talking about. So being able to sit there and spend time with the ODAs is great. But at the same time, I recognize that a lot of them tell me things are awesome because they want me out of their team room as fast as fucking possible, right? So they're like, no, things are great, CSM. Everything is sunny and 72. It's the best it's ever been. And I walk away feeling great about, myself as a leader, fully knowing that they weren't going to bring it up to me today. And maybe that's exposure, right? Like they don't know me well enough. I'd like to believe that because now at this point, every team sergeant in my group, I think maybe one or two exceptions has been through TSAP. And since we started running TSAP 2 years, more than that, maybe 4 years ago, I've sat through every one. So these guys have had one-on-one interaction with me. I've taught them all the NCRER and talent management classes. I sat down and had conversations with them for hours at a time. And I like to believe they're pretty candid. I've gotten some pretty candid feedback from them. And at the very least, so if the staff sergeant who just got there doesn't want to be completely open and honest with me, I hope that they at least tell their team sergeant and they share it with me. Right? That's the idea. So Yeah, being down in the team room is great. I mean, I rely on the company sergeant majors to be able to sit there and, come back to me and be like, hey, this is what the guys are talking about. But I can say one of the things that we've tried to do recently is engage more with that company level leadership. Maybe more so than in the past. I remember being a company sergeant major, uh, and frankly, I don't think I did more than maybe 2 interactions with my group CSM. And it's not a ding on him. He was just like, they were getting ready to go to. I mean, Korea was a mess at the time. They were busy. They were traveling a lot, but I talked to my commander about this a lot, and was like, hey, I feel like the place I need to be for this organization is here, and engaging with, at the very least, like the company level leadership and above. And if I can get to the team sergeants, that's even better. And as an example, like every TSAP we run 2 of them a year. I'm at every one, 2 weeks. That's where I'm at, because the most important thing that I think we do is the development of our next generation of leader. So yeah, I'd love to be able to sit there and spend all day in the team room. Unfortunately, my time is consumed with other things.
It's an age thing too. I mean, the team sergeant's going to be the closest to you as well, and the guys on the teams, staff sergeant and the sergeant first class, I mean, they're getting younger and younger, right? And that gap's only gotten bigger even since I was in. I mean, when I was started in the course, they were telling me the average age of a team is in the 30s. It's in the 20s now, isn't it?
It is.
So
Don't quote me on that. I know it's probably maybe low 30s right now. But we have some really old people that set off that average, so that's the problem, right? Like, you get a guy who's 50 years old, and he'll sway that average.
well,
But
you said
yeah,
getting
the
guys
guys
to
are
tell
younger,
you,
right? Like,
yeah.
the biggest thing is like, you walk into a team room and you ask, like, hey, what's the average time that you've been on a team? And unless a guy's come back from SWIC, you're looking at about 3 to 4 years max, right? The team sergeant's got significantly more experience than his next senior guy in most cases. And occasionally you'll get and once again, I speak for my own group here, as far as the demographic goes, but occasionally you'll get a senior who's like back from SWIC, who's got, 6, 7 years of team time plus some SWIC experience, maybe some time in the regular Army, and that guy's just sitting there struggling to help manage the juniors with the team sergeant. You know what I mean? So it's definitely, we have gotten younger. I can't tell you what the number is, but like, that experience level has declined. It's just by virtue of, you know, who we're recruiting in. I think this is the first year where we have more X-rays. I don't know if it's the first year, but we certainly have more X-rays that are getting through the pipeline than anything else, right? This year, I don't know if it's the first year, but I want to say that it is. We've had more graduation or more X-rays graduate than in-service recruits, right? So that's obviously going to tip the scales on experience and things like that. But it's not a problem this year. It's going to be more of a problem next year. Every year, it's gotten a little bit more towards that. Uh, Once again, for numbers of reasons, whether it's, the readiness of the regular Army and like the people that they're sending, or I don't know what, I've heard everything from it's generational to, like this generational, as in like, this generation is weaker than the last generation, which I don't subscribe to that idea, to, like, their bond density is less than if they never drank milk or played outside, right? Like, and then you talk about, standards within the regular Army, the ACFP being one of them, that, that is absolutely an easier PT test to pass than the APFP. Certainly to max, it's difficult, but in terms of passing, I can't think of anybody I know that has failed this thing, but I mean, I'm sure they exist. It's just, it's a pretty low bar. But when you train to, a passing standard, whatever that is, you're not going to come into the regiment or come to selection with, a sub 13 2-mile run, which you used to come to selection with a sub 13 2-mile run, because that's like, that was the max on the ATFT, right? And that's what you're shooting for.
Yeah, that was.
And I don't even know
Yeah.
what it is now. Not for the 17 to 21 age group that it was when you and I went through, but
I don't know. I mean, I was astounded at selection, the amount of people that failed the PT test. It was 20% that failed the PT test. And then I didn't realize till I started doing the show is that people were just going to selection to get 3 weeks off of work.
Yeah, I don't know how that plays out in their head because I don't remember selection being 3 weeks off of work. Like, and I went out there, like if the guy would have to get all the way through 10 weeks to get through 3 weeks of no work. Because otherwise, if you just quit, like
You go
you
right
get sent
back.
home, and you get sent home a failure, which
Yeah.
nobody wants to be, or a quitter, which I'm sure no one's telling. They're not going back to the formation. Like, I quit. But at the same time, right? Like, it's
Well,
definitely not a break.
I do have a theory about that. I wonder what you think about it. Is so I went through in the teens, right? And there was a weird time in the course, and anybody listening to this that went through knows what I'm talking about. There was IUW. It was the surprise selection, and a lot of dudes that should have graduated got fucking dropped. Surprise. And at that time, there was selection classes were fucking huge.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody could go. Everybody went. And this is just my opinion. Selection in the Q course at that time created more anti-Green Berets than it did real Green Berets.
Sure, you spend
And now we're seeing the result of that.
perhaps. I mean, so this has gone on for decades, right? Like our growth in 2002, let's say, and beyond, like the necessity to grow came from the GWAT, right? And then we expanded our battalions based on need, or rather, we expanded our groups in the 4th Battalion based on need. And this continued to go on. But I can sit there and tell you, since 2006, my cadre called me weaker than they ever were. Danny Orozco still says my generation is weaker than his ever was. He reminds me of this every time we have breakfast together. So, and he's not that much advanced to me, right? But every couple of years, I would go back to brag, right? Whether it was for a school usually for a school, right? So I go to SLC in 2009. And they sit there and they complain about whatever the standard was then. I'm in the class with cadre now who are at SWIT cadre or talking about the current standards. And they're like, man, we can't drop anybody. When I went through the Q course, the cadre would tell us, they come into the team house or they come into Sage or they come into the SUT barracks and they'd be like, it's embarrassing. We can't get rid of more of you guys. And you're like, oh, that's cool. In 2012, I went back there for another school and I ran into cadre who were my friends and they would tell me the same thing. And this is not a new narrative, right? Like this is something that's said every year. 2017, if I'm not mistaken, we had the night letter come out, right? Where the cadre sat down once again and said the exact same thing they said back in 2012 when I was out there, in 2009, and probably every year since. We're dropping standards. We're letting anybody get past this thing, and so on and so forth. And so what you see from the night letter wasn't necessarily, or once again, this is my opinion, but what you see from the night letter is the decline started almost right there. And what I mean by that is when that came out and we said, hey, we're lowering standards and we're letting anybody through, I think it scared people into this, what we call excellence creep, right? Like every year, the standard got harder. So what I told the guy, I went into a chat room the other day and I was talking to the guys. I was like, who's the newest guy here? And the guy raised his hand. I was like, how long you been here? He's about 6 months. I said, do you know that you went through the hardest selection of anybody in this group or in this team right now? Objectively, the hardest selection, right? And they will show you, they're not show you, but they've showed me like the standards of how it's gotten harder over the last couple of years. And it's, once again, it's not subjective. It is, hey, it started here, and then it's time, work to rest ratio, number of people on the apparatus, and distance have all gotten harder, right? And as they're looking at it, this is the leadership out there. As they're looking at it, it's like, how do we get here? I asked that question to the SWIT cadre the other day when I was out there. I was like, how did we get here? How do you get to that point where you sit there and you say like, hey, you know what? This isn't good enough. We have to make this a little bit more difficult. My theory on this is that you as a cadre are sitting there and you're watching somebody graduate from a thing and you're like, how did that shitbag graduate? It must not be hard enough. We have to implement something else. We started doing things like you say, I don't remember what the acronym was. IUW?
Yeah, Introduction to Unconventional
Yeah.
Warfare.
So
I think it was from 12 to 19.
yeah, I never did any of that. So I guess you went through a harder course than I did. But
No.
I mean,
All my listeners, I went through the first easy class. IUW was just this surprise, weird thing. I didn't think the course was that. IUW killed a lot of people's dreams. So I went through the first easy class. Don't let me get that wrong.
and I joke, but like, because everybody says either they went through the last hard class, but I can tell you, like, objectively, the standards have gotten harder. So what does that mean, right? Like, are we getting it wrong? It depends on how you ask. You know, if you were to ask the cadre out there, and here's the thing, is like I've talked to these guys as much as I can, right? Like I've tried to get out there a couple of months. I try to talk to the cadre that are group of origin at first group specifically, and try to get some feedback from them. How surprisingly, most people when they get to SWIC, they really like it, right? Like it's a leadership opportunity that they wouldn't get on ODA, especially if they're younger. They appreciate the responsibility that they're given. And I can tell you, we send some phenomenal people there to teach. And everything that they do, I say everything because, this is what I've seen, is well intentioned, right? No one is going there and being like, no one's going there and shit bagging it up. I remember you told a story the other day, I think, or one of your guests told it, where it was like back in, I think it might have been Adam, was talking about like his cadre would come to work drunk, a decade and a half ago or whatever it was. I mean, we all back then we all share those stories.
Yeah.
Then I can tell you the people that we send out there now are nothing but professional from what at the very least that's the intent, right? Everybody has their personal problems. Everybody, goes through some dark times and stuff like that. That happens. We try to keep an eye on it. But by and large, the cadre that I've seen out there and I've talked to from all the groups are just phenomenal. And they are all trying to do the best job that they absolutely can for the good of the regiment. They're not kicking people out because they're like, this guy's not as good as me, or this guy, like, they're not badge protecting. That's not the intent. They truly believe that they're doing the right thing by the regiment, and that's great, right? That's what we want.
Do you think that used to be the thing though, is badge protecting, and now they're just they're getting more scrutinized because there's more eyes on the cadre? Because some of the stories I hear from SOPC and SUT and all these other things from the early 2000s and into the 10s are they would get chaptered out of the military if they did that shit today.
Sure. I don't know that it was badge protecting. I'll be honest with you. I don't think the narrative's changed much. And I'll give you an example. Is when I went through SUT, my SUT cadre walked in our room and he said, if I don't want you on my ODA, then you're not graduating. It doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter if you pass your patrol or if you do everything right or you get all the red cards or all the blue cards or whatever they were. You weren't passing if I didn't want you on my ODA. Well, you ask the question like, hey, Staff Sergeant, who are you to make that determination on behalf of the regiment? A. B. I'm not going to be on your ODA today. I'm in SUT. Like, and of course you don't know this back then, but hindsight, being what it is, I could sit there and be like, how does this guy know? How could somebody say that? The hubris that goes along with that you're going to sit there and tell the organization, the regiment, that I'm the gatekeeper of this organization. And if he's not good enough for my ODA, then he can't graduate, no matter if he meets the standards or not. That's not necessarily badge protecting. He's doing what he thinks is right to maintain the sanctity of his ODA. Once again, I don't think
is that his fault or his team sergeant's fault.
I mean, you're a product of your experiences, right? So, but do you? Yeah, is that a learned behavior? I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly no psychologist or anything like that. I can just tell you that not much has changed. I hear the same thing today, right? People will sit there and be like, hey, I don't want this guy. I wouldn't want this guy in my company. I wouldn't want this guy on my team. And it's like, guys, he's not going to be on your team today. He's going to be on your team a year from now. That's if he passes 5 other gates. And then when he gets to your team, if you don't want him there are mechanisms to get him off your team, right? And there's mechanisms to make sure he doesn't re-enlist. We're always going to get people that slip through the cracks. It's just the way that it is. The Army is not infallible. Our process is not infallible. But we have checks and balances to make sure that they don't sit there and stay and make the regiment worse and bring down people. But are
Well,
we sacrificing?
that's how we got there. Then you asked, you're like, how did we get here? That's how we got here, is because it continues on. The cadre hold it to on a team today when they're not thinking about they're you're an IUW, you're an SUT. Well, that's, you just started, and now you're holding them to graduation standard, which at graduation you don't know jack shit
Right.
either.
No, I'm with you. Like I had a luxury that I think a lot of my peers didn't, right? Like my first team sergeant, I could have swore this guy hated me. And we're good friends to this day. He lives 2 states over. He comes back here pretty often. We have a beer together. But like, that guy sat there, held me to a standard, and helped raise me up, as opposed to either punt me down the street because I wasn't getting it fast enough, or ignoring me, right? Like, this guy is not worth investing my time in. He took a kid who was terrified of heights on an ODA that was a free fall ODA. And the first thing he asked me was like, "Are you afraid of heights?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Tell me now, and I'll send you back to the B team. I'm not wasting a Halo slot." I said, "Nope. I'm a good soldier. He does what it's told. So when told to jump out of the plane, I do it." And he's like, "All right, good enough for me." And then he proceeded for the next year to tell me what a shitbag I was. And so it's a tough love, but you know what? He never sat there and was like, "Hey, you're not getting it. You're gone." He never sat there. Like, he was actually fairly patient with me. And as I was a company sergeant major, as I was a team sergeant, I watched people, and I wonder if this is a product of GWAT and like the not having the time to deal with these things. So like, I watched him sit there and be like, "Hey, I don't want this shit back. Get rid of him," and not do the paperwork. Not try to get him out of the army, but just say something like, "He's not a right fit for my ODA." Like, what does that mean, man? Like, is he a weirdo? Is he not physically fit? Is he not right for the army? Or is he just not a good personality for your ODA? Is he not doing the job? And so people would bounce the guy down the hallway. What do you think that does to a guy's confidence? You know?
It's not good.
Yeah. And then this guy's not getting developed in the same way either, right? Like, he's like, "Yeah, I didn't say the answer." So now he's fired, essentially. But we don't actually fire him or kick him out of the regiment. We don't actually do it for standards. It was more like, "Hey, nah, this guy's just not going to work out." Right. And we never really qualified that statement. So, and once again, there's part of that is like, "Hey, we're getting ready for war. I don't have time to get this guy up to speed." But I also see that as kind of it's an abdication of responsibility. In the infantry, you're a squad leader and you get a private, you don't get to sit there and be like, "I don't want this dude." Right? It doesn't matter what MOS, what branch, there's no place that you get that opportunity to be like, "Get rid of this dude. I don't want to deal with him. I don't want to raise him up."
Ranger Battalion, they'll RFS you for getting your haircut wrong. I mean,
Yeah, but Ranger Battalion
that's
has
the
a
one.
process to do that, right? Like, they have a selection process. They have, of course,
Yeah.
and they've taken it on themselves. So, for example, right, like, their enabler population is selected, right? We don't have that in SF, right? We don't have an enabler selection process. We have standards that they have to meet, and we can get exceptions for them. But when they get to us, it's our responsibility to raise them up. So yeah, Rangers have that ability, but they've decided to do that. They made that choice. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying there's anything, but the Ranger battalions are significantly smaller than the SF regiment. So, and not only that, but they're drawing from the population of the infantry. We are as well, but for us to get there and go through a Q course, go through all of that, get to an ODA, and then for a team sergeant to go, "I don't want the problem. I don't want the hassle." Give it to somebody else. Give it to a better leader is the way I take that statement, right? Like, somebody who's going to sit down, put the time in, and invest in a person. And once again, I'm here because I had leaders that invested in me, and I was not smart. I was 135 pounds most of my SF career. I smoked, and like, I don't know how I got here, to be perfectly honest with you, but it was because I had leaders all the way up until I became, not even became, like, I had leaders all the way up until to today who sit there and still invest in me and sit there and take the time to mentor, and if I didn't have that, certainly wouldn't be here. And that's all I ask of my subordinate leaders, right? Like, these team stars, man, fucking take the time, make these dudes better.
And I mean, obviously, you reach out to me, and this doesn't exist in group, right? You can't just come on and record and just run with your thoughts and get everything out for the guys. And guys will come and listen to this and they'll pick out the things they want to hear. But, you know, you've said to me when we spoke on the phone, you're like, I'm getting out in less than a year. There's nothing going to really change my career path. So what is it? What is the end state of you coming on here? Is it just to hopefully reach down and grab the guys and go, here's what's in my head, or what lasting impression do you want to leave talking to me?
Well, so, and I think I said this to you on the phone too, was, I want to be able to sit there and get this information out to people who may not know it, right? It's like you said, they don't want to leave their team room. They're not coming up to group, but I'm asking me personally, right? Like, hey, what's the direction of the regiment? If in some cases, if I didn't force them, they wouldn't take a hold of their own career. At the very least, learn enough about how to do it in order to be successful. And so that's why we have company sergeant majors and battalion CSMs. Is you take care of them in spite of themselves, right? Like no one sits there and is like, hey man, the metric of success of a battalion is to make sure that their shot records are up to date. But their shot records need to get up to date so that they don't get typhoid or whatever it is. I was never a medic, so but you know what I mean? Like we're taking care of them. And if I left it up to the guy to do this, he would be like, no, I'm not getting that shot, man. In fact, I think I'm delinquent today on all the things that I'm supposed to because I don't have somebody making me go. But I'm sure my group commander will tell me now after he's heard this. But you save them from themselves, right? What I wanted to do is maybe clear the air or dispel some of the rumors, right? So if there's questions and you've had a bunch of guests on there that have brought up points, right? Hey, retention of that, which I think I've already covered, but like our budgets, are we going to lose AIP? Are we going to lose our bonuses? Things like that. I can answer those questions. I can talk about the state of the regiment. I can talk about where we're going, the policies that we're discussing in order to get things better, or at the very least on a growth trajectory. Because at the end of the day, and you're right, I'm going to get out of the Army in about a year. I have about a year left in the position I'm in, and then I'll full blow retire a couple months later. And this is what I tell most of the guys. I'm like, it's not my rucksack that gets heavier. It's the guys on the ODA. If we don't produce more Green Berets, if we don't sit there and recruit talented individuals, and we don't retain our talented individuals, right? It's their rucksack that gets heavier. Mine is, I'm tiring in a year. And honestly, it's not that heavy right now.
The first one, and this is, from veteran side, is we are lowering the standard. Okay. No matter what you say, sure, people are going to default back to, and there is a little window of that is true because now you can get a waiver if you're active duty from 100 GT score instead of 110. I found that one out.
Yep, but that's always been the case. I just want to let you know that.
I didn't know that. I thought that was a new thing.
No, so my buddy, I've had guys on my ODAs that had to get waivers to come in back as far back as '06. So, we've always given a waiver. The waiver is designed so basically somebody in charge will look at it and they'll look at presumably a whole man concept, right? They do it at selection of skill. Like when they look at things like, how they answer their psych screenings and things like that, they'll look at it and be like, hey, these are some red flags, but are they able to overcome it with some of their strengths and things like that? They try to look at a whole person as opposed to, hey, this is a red flag, get rid of them. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an exception. It would just be, or they wouldn't, the exception of policy wouldn't exist. They would just be like, hey, they don't meet the standard, goodbye, right? So when it comes to stuff like that, GT waiver, right? Yeah, I'm sure there's other examples of that, right?
That one, because you get in the chat rooms and people make shit up or they'll just post shit to piss people off. So if you know the internet game, you can kind of discount a lot of that if you just go fucking Google stuff. But people get riled up and then they get caught up in the comments, and then that doesn't really help anybody out. But the prevailing thing is we're lowering the standard, we're pushing people through, or we're pushing the standard lower to pass to graduate females. So And that's all. A lot of people, someone doing something that I don't think should do it, it somehow diminishes my accomplishments. That feeds into people's things and like that. But from what I've heard and from what you said, is the actual standard at the schoolhouse has not. I know Sergeant Major Weimer, Sergeant Major of the Army,
SMA, yeah.
he said, and he said that, the standard is not being lowered. Is that, from where you sit, that's correct,
Yeah,
right?
from where I sit, that's correct. In fact, if the last 5 years have told us anything, it's gotten harder. Like, we've graduated less and less people. So anybody who sits there and says that we're lowering the standard to select and graduate more people, I'd like to know where they get that from. And maybe they got a guy on their team they don't like, right? But like, I can't believe this guy got through, you know? Like, but it's one data point. My question, since I've been in this position for the last 2 years, is that, hey, are we leaving talent on the table? Right? Are we not selecting guys for fear that we'll select one bad dude? Are we throwing away 10 good dudes? I don't know. Right? I don't know what the answer is. There's no single answer to this, I don't think, right? But I would argue this is that if we're graduating half of what we need to for production, that means that there's low and SWIC to send more people through, presumably. So we could accept a little risk at selection, knowing that they still have to do another year in the Q course, right? They still have to get through SCTs, they still have to pass their patrols, they still have to get through Robin Sage, they still have to make good decisions, they have to get through the academics of whatever their MOS is, SEER, and then they still have to pass language. These are not easy things, as you know, right? Every phase in my recollection was miserable. And if you go after there right now, they would probably agree. Anybody who's in phase or in stage right now is like, yeah, it's a cool experience. I wouldn't want to do it again necessarily, right? Like the info alone is enough to make you never want to do it again. But these. But why don't we accept a little bit more risk and then see if they get to the next phase of the Q course, and then so on and so forth. And then, like I said, if they make it all the way through and they get to a team and they just shit down their leg, well, then get rid of them. It's not impossible. It's really not that much of a challenge. A guy really has to try hard to not want to be on an ODA, but I've had it happen where a guy's like, hey, I'm not performing, he just refuses to perform, right? And I'm not talking somebody who like is not like, you have to be physically strong enough, admittedly, right? Like there's physical standards in the Army on an ODA, and you have to be a certain degree of intelligence. But as long as they're making legal, ethical, moral choices that are all good, you can take a guy who was 135 pounds and train him to keep up with the rest of the ODA, right? You can take a guy who may not have the same cognitive ability as the Fox or the Delta on the ODA, and he can still be a solid contributing member and a great team sergeant one day, right? But you have to invest in these guys, and you have to give them a chance, right? We talk about this. I talked about this when I went out to selection. It's like, hey, we're dropping some people here who, we're not even giving them a chance to rise to the occasion. We're like, hey, maybe they had a bad run. Maybe they hurt themselves in there and they're dragging their feet or whatever, right? Maybe they had a bad day. People have bad days, but we're not even giving them a chance to rally.
Okay. I had a kid tell me the other day he's on a 12-man team. There's only 4 Green Berets on that team.
Is that right? I'm hoping it's not first group. Please don't tell me that it is.
It's not.
Yeah.
But even if he's off by 50% in his assessment, that's not good.
It's not. It's definitely not. And like I said, that rucksack gets heavier for the 4 guys that remain because they still have 12 dudes worth of work to do. Right? That hasn't changed. So, when there's going to be times where that's true. And even in first group, right? Like when those guys redeploy, what happens every time they redeploy is you get hit for the SWIC levy. Guys, that was their last deployment. They're going to ETS. It happens every time. As soon as they get through their R3 cycle and they start training again, the group CS, the CSMs start building those ODAs back up. So I was a team sergeant for about 4 years, and in the 4-year cycle, I had 2 almost completely different teams. right? We went through train up for Afghanistan. We trained up. We deployed. We came back, and the team was gutted. And I got almost an entirely brand new team. And then I did another year and a half with that ODA as I trained and planned for the next whatever it was, right? That's just been a natural cycle of things for as long as I've been in group. Um, so, and that's not going to change. But there's going to be times where you have 4 guys on the team because you're waiting for the new dudes to show up. Yeah, we just need the new dudes to show up.
Yeah, that's a different thing. I've talked to other people on the show about that. There's all kinds of shit. There's seasons, there's cycles, there's I don't know. There's all kinds of shit that goes into that, and kids today and whatever, and you can make up any litany of excuses that you want and people joining or the temperature in the regular army of sending people. So
Man, I tell you, in
I don't know. I was
2004, no one
supported,
wanted
but
to let me go. Like they weren't sitting there and being like, "Oh, you're going to selection? Good for you, man. You need some time off to train." Like that shit didn't happen back then, and I guarantee it doesn't happen now. But you made it work. So I would just say that like there's nothing new going on. None of these things, none of these problems that we're facing right now are new to the current generation, right? I remember my first J set was to Cambodia, and it was in 2009, and the money flowed like wine. Like we had more money on a J set than we could ever spend. We had more op fund money than we could spend. We could sit there and go, and we had cultural trips, we had things like that, all for the intent of like getting that experience, right? Being able to sit there and work in the theater. And then 3 years later, I went to Thailand, and that budget was cut by probably half. I don't know why, right? Maybe we picked up more JSETs that year. We just didn't have the money for it. We were deploying. I don't know what it was because I was on an ODA, and I didn't ask the group CSM why my budget was cut. All I know is that the trip wasn't as fun, and I didn't have as much latitude to go and do things. And I probably sat there at one point or another with my friends, sitting around a table, drinking, tigers or sandmegs or whatever it was, going, yeah, group it isn't like what it used to be, man. you know, our budget's cut in half, and like I don't get as much ammo as I used to get. And if that was actually true, if every year we lost more and more and more, we'd be at zero by this point. Because that was 2012. That was 13 years ago. And yet our budget now is bigger than I think it's ever been, at the very least in terms of like O&M and training dollars. And we have less people, so the dollar per person goes a little bit further. And even then, it's like, and in some cases, it's not enough, right? Like in order to do all the things that we ask these guys to do, which is, you've seen the standards on this stuff to validate and to get out the door. I think Adam brought it up in his podcast, but like being able to sit there and send guys to SOCM to refresh as an 18 Delta, right? Like that costs money. We need to be able to sit there and send people to do it, but we don't sit there and pinch pennies on the training of its individuals in order to go and meet the operational requirements, right? Because at the end of the day, the future of the organization is the trained individuals that are in it, not whether or not we deployed to on a JSET to Thailand, right?
What was that one? What is being sold to prospective or incoming Green Berets now? Because some of the guys that have come on the show have said that it seems to them that they think the new generation is still being sold the promise of the GWAT.
Yeah.
I don't know what does that sound like to you?
So, GWAT ended 22. I think that was the last time. 3
years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah. 3 years ago.
So anybody who was recruited and was graduating from the Q course, unless they're an 18 Delta, came in post GWAT, right? And they might have been showing the videos and all the cool stuff we do, but we still do cool stuff. That's the thing. It's like I still have guys that are helocasting out of and doing military free fall and dives and mountain climbing. And we're called upon to do a lot of like niche stuff in theater still, right? Like none of that's changed. The only thing that's different is we're not deploying to Afghanistan, and doing direct action, which is what I think a lot of people may have come in to do during that generation. And I saw a lot of people leave because they didn't get their deployment on, right? Like they came here to do a thing and they never got a chance to do it. And they didn't really want to do what it is we're doing now, right? Um, but I've talked to the recruiters and like, hey, what are you shopping at this point? And by and large, it's like, hey, what a Green Berets mission is, like UW and SID and like, there's no place else in the regular army that you're going to deploy with 12 guys and have the autonomy that you have in special forces, right? Like I send guys to Korea with almost no oversight. I send guys to Thailand with almost no oversight to develop training plans with their partners to make themselves better. All of this in the effort of, readiness. Um, uh, Obviously, there's other reasons to do this and why we're over there right now. But at the end of the day, when I deployed, I had leaders that had never been to combat, right? And the people who trained them for combat had never been to combat, right? Like I came in 2006 is when I got to the ODA, but in the gap between Vietnam and maybe Desert Storm, but more likely GWAT, there's a lot of Green Berets that never deployed. They never sat there and went to combat or saw anything like that, but they damn sure trained up the next generation of people who did deploy. Like that's what's going to happen. If these guys don't end up in combat, they are going to make ready the next generation that goes before. Right. So this is not. It's not as if we're just sitting on our thumbs. In fact, our guys are as busy as they've ever been. I've talked about this before with my own, with my guys. It's like, hey man, GWAT was super easy. I got all my shit together. I put it on a pallet. Somebody took it away from me. They put it on a C-17. 2 days later, I got on that C-17. I took a nap and I was in Afghanistan. Someone picked me up. They sent me to a team house. And every day I got up and I went and I did whatever it was that we can do to win our nation's wars. It required no planning on my part, except for the daily missions that we would go on, which were fairly simple, right? It's 5 Ws to get out the gate or a con op, which wasn't difficult to create, especially if you've done it a few times. Food was delivered to me. I never had to get buy-in. The Afghan army was sitting there right as my partner in most cases, unless it was like a VSO mission or something. That was easy. like I would go to the Philippines on a 6-month rotation and try to get buy-in from your partner over there, or go to like some of the countries that we go to now and try to just earn that confidence from them. It's not just immediate. And these guys are asked to go and do that. Like sit there and be good ambassadors for our organization and bring people in and we use the moniker like the partner of choice. It's because we have extremely talented individuals who are very well trained, who also sit there and they go in with that diplomacy. They want to be good partners to our partners, right? And so we want these other nations that work with us, we want them to come in and be like, hey, these are the people that we want to work with, right? We don't want to work with these other guys. So like I said, I mean, whether or not we're in combat today, who knows what tomorrow brings, right? And hopefully that we're not sitting where we are today with the numbers, and the call comes in and we're like, hey, you got to deploy, right? Because I wouldn't say we're gonna be scrambling. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm an optimist, so I believe that we will figure it out because that's what we've been doing. But when GWAT happened, we didn't have 6,000 people. We were closer to 4, maybe 3, 5, right? But we were deploying people like we had 6. We figured it out, But just because we can doesn't mean we should. I truly believe we should be trying to solve this problem for the future so that we don't have to scramble in order to do it, right?
Okay. So, yeah, obviously nobody knows. I mean, it's chicken kickoff, and the schoolhouse is good. We're going to figure it out. And if anything kicks off, there's this patriotism that kicks in, and everybody wants to get involved, and people will jump in. So that pool exists there. It just isn't activated. But what about the teams themselves expanding? Is there still talk of an electronic warfare specialist on the team?
I mean, there's talk of all kinds of things. Like it's not a real boy until somebody tells us to make it happen. We experiment still. I mean, a couple of years ago, we tried to converge with ODAs and they didn't work, but it wasn't for lack of trying. And I know at first we put talented individuals to the leadership of that organization in order to give it its best opportunity of saying whether or not this thing made sense. And we're going to continue to experiment, right? Like there could be a robot MOS. I don't know. There could be Like at one point in the regiment, we talked about having a linguist on the team, like an 18 Lima. I don't know if you were around during that time, but that was something that was floated for a long time. And people experiment with stuff, and they give it their best effort, and then if it doesn't work out, we try the new thing. But we are constantly innovating in order to see what works for the future. Because maybe an ODA of the future isn't 12 people, right? Maybe it isn't these MOSs today. And I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that I don't know. Frankly, if for the next year we can do nothing and just keep it the way that it's been for the last 20 years, that would be great for me, so that I could leave, knowing what I'm supposed to be doing every day. But I guess that's not as challenging or fun. But the regiment has never stopped innovating, and trying to come up with things to make things better. But once again, this is what we said during convergence, right? Like, you get this from the team rooms. And at the time, I was a 3 sergeant major, and so it was like these guys don't know what they're doing, man. These dudes this is crazy. I can't believe they would do this, and they're out of touch. All the cliched things that E7 say about anybody in a sergeant major or above, or a colonel or above position, right? But I can tell you, like, no one came to the table with that idea and said, "Hey, what'll fuck with these guys today? Convergence." Like, I'm gonna really ruin their day. No one's doing that. Like, somebody's like, "Hey, this is something we should try and see if it makes the organization better," right? And in fact, when we talked about convergence, it wasn't the GOs that came up with this idea. It was teams that we sent there, leaders on teams and at company levels that we sent to Bragg to sit there and say, "Hey, what does the ODA of the future look like?" And these guys all came together and they created the draft that they came up with, right? Like, it should have this and it should have this. And like you said, whether or not it worked, it was well intentioned. But it just didn't play out. So not a big deal, right? We have to keep trying stuff like that. But I can tell you, like I said, I can't say this enough. No one is sitting up in our ivory tower going, "How can I fuck with these guys today?"
Come on, there's got to be somebody that's just fucking
Maybe,
just making shit up.
I don't know them, but I can tell you, like, we painstakingly sit there, and like every decision that we make that is a policy decision, we go over ad nauseum in order to make sure that we're not, like, looking at every angle we possibly can, and then we miss stuff constantly. Like, how'd you not see this coming? It's like, 'cause we're stupid, clearly.
Obviously, we're
Yeah.
stupid. One thing when we spoke on the phone that you wanted to bring up was the bane of your existence, the survey questions.
Oh, the Deox. Yeah. Yeah. So, well,
What did you want?
well, yeah. So, Ryan brought it up. He's like, "Hey, no one reads these things, and no one, they even if they do, they get feedback, and they don't do anything about it." And it's something that I've said, obviously. The funniest thing about it, and so I wasn't always a part of this process, obviously, right? Like, until you're sitting there one day, like, picking the questions that you're going to ask the formation. I can tell you it's not random. It's like, "Hey, what do we want to know about our formation right now? What do we want to know what they think about?" And so we sit there and I wouldn't say agonize over it, but we definitely put some thought to it. And then we send it out. The only people we don't ask about for the questions is we don't ask our subordinates, because it's our subordinates that are going to be answering them, right? So, like, at the group level, the battalion leadership and the company leadership are going to be answering questions about the group leadership, right? So we don't ask them what questions they would like to answer. It's more like, "Hey, answer these questions because this is what we want to know from you guys." And it's supposed to be anonymous so that they can be honest. Like, people say, they don't listen. This is why I'm not filling it out, is they don't do anything with it, period, right? So last year, myself and the commander, we went over the Deox. We sent it out. We talked to the battalions and said, "Hey, please fill this thing out, because we want the feedback so we can make it better." And I can tell you, like, my current commander is all about that feedback, and he wants to know what he can do for the formation. Now, at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to take everybody's recommendation. There's always going to be 2 points to it. Everybody's going to have different opinions. Some of it's just not able to be implemented. The thing I get the most on every single survey that is asked is like, "Hey, what should we stop doing?" And they're like, "Please stop making me take online training." And I have to remind people constantly that I have no say in this as a group CSM. I can't sit there and tell them that they no longer have to do the Army mandated mandatory training. Right. So if nothing else, if this podcast eliminates that as a complaint in the formation, then I will have succeeded as a leader. It's either that one or it's
It'll probably double. It'll probably double
now
the
they're gonna
amount
fuck with
now.
me is what's gonna happen. So, but the other one I get is don't ask me where I store my guns. Like it's none of your fucking business. This is America. I got that on the last one. And because on every DOC survey that we send out, it asks people where they store their guns. Right. This isn't a question that I pick or that the commander picks. It's a mandatory question that's been on every one that I can remember. And I think it'll be on the next one that we send out. So if it's not, please don't make me have to be a liar. But it's been on every single one. But there's a reason that they ask this question. And it's not as if they're going to be able to sit down and go to your house and ask you because it's an anonymous survey, right? They can't sit there and be like, all right, Sergeant Smith said that he didn't store his guns in his locker. I need you to take his guns and put it in the arms room. That's not what we're seeking, right? But from the ops psych perspective, the thing with the guns and where they're storing them is, that time that it takes a person to pull a gun out of a storage safe could be the time that makes the difference in whether they take their own life, right? And gathering that data gives you an idea of, hopefully like maybe the safety of this organization. I'm not exactly sure what they do with the information, but I can tell you from the ops psych's perspective, because I asked the same question, like why do they do this? Is because they want to know if people are sailing or if there should be a concern out there when it comes to this. Because when they interview people who have either attempted to take their own life or that they've or maybe didn't get so far as to actually like pull the trigger and survive, they said, hey, in that moment, it took me, like I couldn't get the dial right or I couldn't get in there fast enough, or in the time it took me just to turn the dial and get in there, gave me that time to sit there and almost talk myself off the ledge. Once again, this is not Bill Delucia's opinion about this. I've asked people about it because I was curious about the same thing. And this is the feedback that I get. Is it, and if that's true, once again, guys, it's well intentioned. It's not like, yeah, where's America store its guns just in case there's a fucking revolution or something like that. That's not what it's for. And frankly, I don't, personally, Bill Delucia doesn't read that one because it doesn't affect the way that we lead as an organization, the group anyways, right? But when it comes to the other stuff, hey, what can a group be doing better? What issues do you have with leadership? Is there, what things do you need in order to be more effective at your job? Here's the thing, right? Like once I get that feedback, it's not me who solves that problem. What the commander typically does is he goes, hey, they need this piece of equipment. S4, figure out how to get that, right? Because there's overwhelming, feedback that says that they need it, right? Or that they need more bullets, or that they need this. You go figure this out. It's super easy at our level to sit there and like, hey, tell somebody to go figure out a problem for us. But we need people to tell us what the problems are, right? Because if every time I go into a team room and they're like, no, this is the best it's ever been, CSM, it's like, that's cool. But I also, once again, I acknowledge you guys will lie to my face to get me out of here. So great.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Nobody wants dad hanging around while the kids are committing crime.
Sure.
And I don't, I mean actual crime, but like you're dad now,
Yeah.
and how does it sound? How do some of the things that people tell you sound that you used to say to leadership now that you're hearing it as like a parent sort of relationship?
Yeah. So, I mean, once again, I complained about the same things. And what I've learned over time, it was just a lack of perspective, right? I didn't know what the company, when you're on the team, the company is the enemy. And when you're in the company, the guy is the enemy, and so on and so forth up the line until like, it's the regiment can't get anything right. But, it teaches you empathy that I maybe didn't possess on an ODA, right? Like the understanding of why the BTM has made this decision. Why is the battalion asking us to do this? And sometimes I just don't have the time to explain it, right? And that's where I default to now. I wish then I possessed the same level of empathy, because I can be like, hey, you know what, man? I know these dudes. They're good guys. They're not making us do dumb shit just for the sake of doing it, right? Like, this isn't, this is a professional organization. We're trying just to get through the day as best we can and deliver a trained and ready force. They didn't just make me come in and fill out this SRB because they were fucking with me, right? There's a reason for it. But back then, I didn't know that. So this is, once again, this is why I want to be able to sit there and want to maybe be able to dispel some of this stuff. And I offer this too, is like anybody who has these questions, like I said, I have no problem answering them. I've made it a point to try to be as transparent with my formation, specifically, like I said, down to the sergeant major level, and I've encouraged them to do the same thing because I feel like the guys will sit there and respond better knowing, even if they disagree with the rationale. At the very least, if they know why we're doing that, they'll at least be like, well, it's still dumb, but at least I understand, you know? Because at the same time, like when I was a kid on the ODA, I didn't understand it. I didn't know. So, and it made things frustrating, right? I think that playing things close to the chest is unnecessary. If we have a reason, and once again, my commander's big about this, is if we're doing something, we're gonna have a reason for doing it. We're gonna let everybody know what that is. So
Yeah. There's got to be something lost though and I go back to it with the age gap because the guys are getting younger, and this is not a knock on the young guys on the team, but when I was 25 years old, I was a fucking idiot.
sure.
And when I was 35 years old, I was just slightly less of a fucking idiot, but at least I understood life a little bit more. And with the age of the team going down, that gap widens.
Well, when you say age,
from understanding what's going on.
I don't know if it's age necessarily as much as it is experience, right? Like I was 24 when I got to an ODA, so I didn't have a whole lot of worldly experience. And I mean, 6 years of my military career at that point, 2 of them had been spent in the Q Corps. So I'd been to combat with the infantry, but I sat in a guard tower for 6 months. I wouldn't have like any tactical experience that I brought to the ODA, right? But I was still young. Like I was still like brain not developed completely, still made dumb decisions. But we still see that today, right? Like our x-rays tend to be a little bit older. We're allowing 18-year-olds to assess and select, but it's a small minority of the total people that they're allowed to come in. But by and large, our guys are like probably entering the Q course the same time I did, like 21, 22, graduate 23, 24, and then they grow up, and once again, hopefully you have some seniors on the ODA that can help, corral these dudes, give them some worldly experience. I mean, I was super lucky. I had like 3 guys that were, I had, with not including my team sergeant, I had 4 senior NCOs on the team who had multiple combat rotations, plus 10 years in the Army and maybe 2 or 3 years in SF by that point. A chief, same way, and then of course the team sergeant who sat there and did that front and right. They were just like, hey man, like show me the rope, what makes you successful, what doesn't, gives good advice, and looks out for you, right? Like I had a guy on my team, he just, halfway through, and pretty early in the after rotation, he just took me under his wing and he sat there and tried to make a Charlie out of me, despite me being an Echo. But he looked out for me, and it was good to sit there and have that guy who I could sit there and go, hey, am I fucking this up? Am I doing that? But by not, producing more people, like there's no seniors of the future if we don't get more guys to the ODAs. I don't know if I answered your question exactly.
No, it is. It's going to sort itself out. But you said, everybody raised you, and so you got the company, so you took a company, a battalion, and group, correct? Right, in first group. When did you feel the seat start to be lonely? Was it when you left the company, or was it when you got the group?
Group's terrible, yeah. At least in the battalion, like you're right across the street from people. And then, depending on the level of interaction, it was easier to sit there and reach out to the team sergeant level at least. And that got your foot in the door in terms of credibility. Group's definitely different, right? Like like you said, we're in a building unto ourselves that nobody wants to enter if they absolutely don't have to. And yeah, I'm older now than I guess I was, so it is a little bit harder to relate to some people. Some of the younger guys, right? Like they're my kid's age, and I don't understand him most of the time. So, but at the same time, like you know, you're not getting the same like level of interaction. It's impossible. The workload becomes different, the amount of meetings, so the time you get to spend at the individual level is just reduced. And so, and it does wear on you a little bit because it's like I didn't do this job so that I could sit there and like answer emails all day. That's uh, you know, you ideally I'd love to sit there and spend time with ODAs every day and be able to sit there and go out and train. I like shooting, but I just every time I go and do that, I'm taking away from some other responsibility I had to the formation, right? Whether that's interacting with my peers, talking to HRC, talking to, our bosses and everything like that. So you have to bide your time, but that's where it becomes more lonely. Where at the battalion, I definitely felt like I could interact a lot more, right?
One we touched on earlier is like, it feels like the group commander or sergeant major are out of touch. Do you feel like the position that you're in causes you honestly to lose touch with the ODAs at times?
That's tough. I mean, I I used to sit through briefings, right? And I still to this day, every now and again, somebody my age will chime in and be like, "Hey, when you're trying to get into, you know, you're trying to get into Thailand, make sure that you fill out this customs form, otherwise it's a nightmare." It's like, dude, the last time you were in Thailand was in 2015. Like that puts you out of touch when it comes to like providing advice, right? So what I've tried to avoid since I was a company sergeant major in a battalion and now a group is like I don't stand on the catwalk and tell people how to clear a corner. There are people that are far more qualified to do that today for their people than I am, right? If I saw something like wildly egregious during TMT, I'd say something, but I don't see that. And I'm certainly not going to start teaching TTPs as they've evolved over the last 10 years since I was a team sergeant, right? But I can tell you, like, and it may come off as out of touch, but I spend a lot of time focusing on the things that the guys don't focus on, which is policy, right? Regiment or like talent management and, professional development, those sorts of things that they don't. A guy will sit there and be able to do, the battle drills and be able to go clear rooms, to be able to do patrols and all the things that we ask them to do. What they won't do is make sure that their NCOERs are written appropriately so they get promoted. And in fact, most of my guys, the fight that I had with them, especially at the company and the battalion, was getting them to go update their SRB so they had the best look possible to become a team sergeant, right? So that's where I apply most of my time. But when they sit there and they talk to me about, whatever it is they're training on, yeah, I have lost touch. I mean, when I was jumping out of planes, I still use the over the shoulder on a military free fall rig, right? I never transitioned to the bottom of the container. So who am I to sit there and tell them the best way to train their ODA, so to speak, on how to be able to get to the ground safely, and do everything there? I am out of touch with that, certainly, right? But that's the beauty of this is like I don't have to. I have to entrust my subordinate leaders to be able to do that. And I do that based on my interactions with them and my, their leaders' assessment of them and watching them train. And every degree of separation, you get a little bit further from being able to sit there and evaluate that. But I trust my subordinate leaders who trust theirs and so on and so forth to make sure that those teams are being trained effectively, right? And I'd say that, once again, being the optimist that I am, I believe that's happening. I believe, that we have some of the best leaders that we've ever had in the organization, that we spend a ton of time working on talent management and picking the right guys. Well, there's going to be people that argue with me about this, right? And we don't always get it 100% right. But I can tell you, like, the investment that we have in our team sergeants and our company sergeant majors in terms of just, making sure that they have the tools and the equipment to be successful, things that I never got, right? it's a pretty large investment in both time and effort from the leadership. So yes, to answer your question, I'm absolutely out of touch. But like I said, I try to focus where I think I can make the most impact.
That's refreshing to hear, but I also wrote down here, that's the job. That is the job, is to do some of those things. But also what popped into my head there is the job is very easy to see up until battalion sergeant major level. What is your job? Because team sergeant is company sergeant major, battalion sergeant major. You have your battalion sergeant majors, but you also have several levels above you and to the side of you. So what is your actual job at Reach defined as?
Yeah, so this is every level of sergeant major is a choose your own adventure. Has been my experience, right? Like they don't. Maybe somebody out there knows what it's supposed to be, right? There's a TV model that tells me the things I'm supposed to be able to do, but the truth is like I can walk into my job every day and focus on the things that I think are important. But once again, I was selected to do this because my predecessors and my leaders today entrust me that I'm doing the right thing for the formation, right? So at the group level, like I said, I've focused mostly on what would be policy, if you want to call it that, right? Like standardizing how we do business on a regular basis. So for example, we wrote an SOP on how we were going to man the organization to include our enabler population, the SOPs that we will use in order to move people from place to place, in order to balance out each of the battalions, to provide predictability to our formation, right? Like, hey, that you're going to start receiving more people at this time because this is the time in the cycle that you need those people, right? Creating the SOPs, the standards by which we apply exceptions, right? Like if we're going to extend somebody in a location, under what circumstances do we do that? Who goes on the SWIC levy and all the policy stuff. And I spend a lot of my time doing that. I spend a lot of my time working with HRC and the regiment, talking about when people are moving and what's the best time in their career to get there, and trying to find the best solution to how to manage the organization. And then I spend a lot of time, or at least I try to spend a lot of time with the mentorship piece with my subordinate CSMs to prepare whoever it is going to replace me to take up this job, because it's stressful, right? Not to whine too much about it, but like, once again, no one joins FF to sit down and be like the senior administrator in the organization and answer emails all day, right? And when you get to this level, if you don't have a lot of answers to how the Army does business, it's going to take its toll on you. So I spend time with my CSMs, I spend time with my sergeant majors talking about that sort of stuff, in order to just make them ready for the next job. And when you distill it down like that, I was thinking about this not long ago. I was like, man, when you put it into words, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it takes up my day. So, and then every now and again, I get to go out and talk to a team and hopefully solve a problem for them. But if at the end of the day I never got to leave and I only worked on that stuff, I can tell you like it would consume most of my time. And that is, like then the engagements overseas, the engagements at, with guys with SWIC and things like that. All of it, if you look at it from a policy perspective, this is where you really start getting into that versus like the down and in more. But everything that has to do with SOPs of policy is to take care of the down and in, right?
How much guidance are you getting from your boss to put down to group, or is most of what's happening in group coming from you?
No, so from my boss, the group commander, he's entrusted me with the professional development of our organization, right, and making sure that it's training, that we're on the right path towards training. Like I said, like I'm not teaching people how to clear cars, but what are the things that we as an organization need to look at in terms of, the things, like the overarching things we should be training on. You always solicit feedback from that. And then, like he's forward a lot by necessity. It's not by choice, trust me. But as a result of it, he's asked me to be back here to manage the organization, right? Like, hey, I need somebody back there to be able to answer questions, be able to provide guidance, all um, and continue to develop the people in it. His number one priority since he's come here has been the development of his personnel, right? That includes everything from going to schools, into ODA training, individual skills, to encouraging college and the things that like just make better humans, right? It's it's like the Ted Lasso. I don't know if you watch that. It's one of my favorite shows. But like he's the worst soccer coach in history, but he's the best coach there ever was because he doesn't care about the soccer aspect of it. He cares about making better humans. And that's what we've tried to focus on is like what can we do to develop these guys so that they're just better at what they're doing, and then they, that translates into better at their job and they can do those things. But I don't teach soccer anymore. I don't teach shooting. you know, I teach people how to lead.
Right.
I hope,
I
anyways.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Are you getting any direction from the one SFC commander? Because there's a few commands that I don't know if you get like direction from, like you've got SOC Pack, you've got SOC Core, you've got one SFC, and is that really kind of it for you,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
is there
two
anything
levels up,
else?
we have use of SOC, which is kind of the overarching.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, we get guidance from all of them. I mean, and we have discussions. Like I have discussions weekly with the one SFC leadership. I talk to the CSM up there along with my peers monthly, and that's just like a scheduled forum. But then reach out and able to talk to them as often as I want, really, if I need to. If I have questions, they listen. Um, in terms of guidance, yeah, we give guidance when it needs to be distributed, right? Like, so as we sit down, we talk about transformation, we receive guidance on what that's going to look like for the future, and they solicit feedback from us to see what the best answer is. But by and large, the groups are, I wouldn't say autonomous, but they're definitely allowed, or they're given the opportunity to sit there and run with the ball, right? Because we answer to a TSOC at the end of the day. So how do we solve those problems, right? How do we prepare for the future? One SFC or use of SOC isn't sitting there and being like, you will do this and you will do this to prepare for the next war that we don't know what it's going to be. I mean, everybody has an idea, but I mean, no one was predicting Afghanistan, at least not at the, at the division level back in 2001. So it's hard to sit there and say. So they give us the autonomy to come up with, how we want to best prepare our group for the future. And they bust steer us if we, right? Like, hey, maybe don't do that. Like, this isn't going to work. Um, or, like I said, I mean, we have a pretty tight relationship, I guess, with fire. So like, I know my commander feels absolutely comfortable calling his boss and just winning, being like, "Hey, boss, what do you think about this?" And they give good feedback. And I also feel the same way about the one SFC CSM. So, but it's not as yeah, I would say it's not as it's not in a bad way, but it's not as like every week they're giving us guidance on how to do X, Y, and Z. Right? I don't feel like they need to be honest with you.
What level do you feel is the most on an island? Is it a group? Is it Special Forces Command? Is it the battalion CSMs? Where do you feel like they're the most kind of separated from everybody else? Because I don't know if I phrased that right. Actually, in my head, because it sounded differently in my head. As soon as I said it, it didn't come out right.
Well, it kind of goes to your earlier question, right? Like, where did me personally feel the most alone? It's that group. Like, group is the furthest away from the tactical element of the organization, right?
Yeah, I guess it's the most severe drop to an administration level, and then above you is even more, and everything's administration, right? So you're kind of in this in between point between the ODAs are right here, and then also, but if I turn around, it's all administration right here, and it's this weird limbo spot.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that certainly. I definitely think we focus more at the like I hate to say it, but like the policy level, even if that policy is at the group level, you know what I mean? Whereas the battalion is the last like real touch point. It feels like with the teams. At least that's how I felt when I was in the battalion. I felt like I had direct communication with the ODAs and influence, and being able to sit there and go down on a regular basis. But as you said before, no one wants dad on their team. I'm certainly talking about, well, this is how I did it back when I was, on an ODA. So you definitely don't get that. But at the next level up, I absolutely feel like we're listened to. And I feel, you know, so it is kind of a weird situation, right? Where you're balancing the two things. And like, what if you don't agree with your boss? You know, all the people, and I wasn't the guy in charge at the time, but like everybody who disagreed with convergence wasn't able to sit there and go down to the team and be like, oh, this is fucking stupid, but we're doing it anyways. They sat there and said, hey, we're going to do the best we can to see this succeed. And they kept their personal opinions to themselves, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, you can have your personal opinions, but it doesn't matter because you're in the army. So, you know,
How do you ever think about, because you're on a team and you have this perception of what group is, and now you're there, you're like, I'm the fucking guy, and how much of an idiot I
yeah.
was and the things I thought then compared to what it actually is. Would you ever think about
Yeah,
that?
so I wonder about it now, right? Like, I wonder if I was just wrong. There used to be, so my first group CSM was a guy named Mike Sherlock. And my only interaction with him was, you probably know him because he stuck around for years after planning IED stuff for the group, right? And I talked to him years later, and I like every time I see him, it's always, I always kind of catch up. But his first interaction with me as a staff sergeant, coming back and getting an award for my rec, right? Just standard award ceremony, service, nothing major. And because I looked like I was probably 13 years old when I crossed the stage to go shake his hand. He's like, how long have you been here, son? And I told him, and he's like, that's awesome. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you. And like, I'm like, all right, this is cool, man. And I probably never talked to him again as a group CSM, right? Fast forward years later, I've been on an ODA for a little bit. I'm one of the more senior guys in the company at this point, and we have this group CSM who, in my estimation, every interaction I had with this guy, he came off as a lunatic, right? Like, and and I used to think like he's got to be fucking with us a little bit, right? Because like at one point he's like, what language do you speak? I said, I had Korean CSM. He's like, Korean, good. We need people at Deck K. We'll put you on assignment immediately. And I was like, no, I'm supposed to go to Oki. He's like, yeah, I can change that. And then he doesn't say another word, right? He had my name. I had to brief him and the group commander on what we had just done in Afghanistan, and he doesn't bring it up again for the rest of the week. We've done rehearsals. I've been in there a couple times, and I'm not going to ask this guy because once again, every time I interacted with him, he said lunatic shit. But he, I had to go to my company assignment. He's like, "Am I going to Korea?" And he's like, "No. Why would you think that?" I was like, "Well, this is what happened. The guy, like, I'm going to Korea because I spoke Korean." He's like, Bill, don't worry about it. You're not going to Korea. I was like, could you please ask? Because I'm really uncomfortable right now. And sure enough, he goes to the guy and he's like, hey, is he going to Korea? And he's like, I don't know who you're talking about. He's like, the fox that was briefed on the thing. He goes, no, he's not going to Korea. Why would he think that? I was like, then why did you say it, dude? I didn't imagine this shit, right? And I'm wondering if he's doing it because he's just having fun, right? Like this is his form of entertainment, is to sit there and say some wild shit and then like go about his day and kind of chuckle to himself, and then he never thinks about it again. I don't know. I still don't have an answer. I've never spoken to him again. So now I'm like, am I that guy? Do I say crazy shit and then I walk out of a room and completely forget about it? And I'm sure it'll be in the comments if I do, but like, and I certainly don't try to.
Yeah.
But I also sat there and I
Do you
wondered to
say
myself,
stuff and you're just, yeah.
every senior leader since then, right? I wondered to myself, do they care to the same level? And I have to believe that they do. Like, and I just wasn't seeing it, right? Like from my foxhole, I wasn't seeing like all the effort they were putting in. All I saw was this snapshot of a fucking lunatic, right? Who's in charge. It could ruin my career or could make my life miserable. And I had no idea that he was well intentioned, right? I had no idea what his intrinsic motivation to be at that group was. Or maybe he was just a lunatic, right? And he just didn't want to get out of the army and they keep offering him jobs. But I can tell you, since I've been paying attention to it, and I would say that as long as I've been paying attention since I got back from HRC, the group CSMs have suffered doing this job in the sense that like Danny Orozco wouldn't eat lunch. As a 3 sergeant major, I'd be like, "Did you eat lunch today?" And he'd be like, "Fuck, man, I haven't had time." I'm like, "All right, here." I go grab him something to eat so he didn't, pass out in the middle of the day because he was working for the people in the formation. And his successor, Eric Coran, by the end of the week, he was just burned out so much. And he never let it show, but
And Eric's a tank.
yeah.
Eric's a
And he's
tank.
incredibly smart, and he would, he ran, he ran hard, and but you could see it would wear on him, right? Like he would sit there and he would, and no one would ever see this, right? But behind closed doors, Aaron would fret over whether or not he was making good decisions on behalf of the formation, right? He'd sit there and be like, "Man, I gotta," and he'd spend a lot of time wondering whether or not, like, um, he could have done something better, if he could have led better, if he could have mentored better, if there was something that he was failing when it came to his subordinates or his boss, right? No one's ever going to see that, like, because in the public persona, he was very confident. So was Day. No one ever knew that Day didn't fucking eat. The only reason that he's probably alive today is because I kept him well nourished. But that's the thing that these guys did. And after Eric, it was Chris King, and Chris cared more about this organization than anybody I know. And it takes its toll on its people. And and so, funnily enough, I don't feel like that, right? Like I don't feel like I'm burned out all the time. There are days that I have bad days, certainly. But what's funny to me and what stands out is when somebody comes up and they're like, "Hey, CSM, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Am I wearing this poorly?" Like, admittedly, I have more gray hair than I did, and maybe I'm skinnier than I ought to be at this point. But like, do I look like, like am I wearing this poorly? Because I don't want to give off the perception that I'm like, my wits end with this place, certainly. But if you care about the organization, if you care about what you're doing, this job is not easy, either as being a battalion CSM or a sergeant major or a team sergeant, right? Like, this job would be the easiest if I didn't give a shit about it. But if I didn't, I wouldn't be on your podcast, right? Because I'm not trying for a career in podcasting after this. So
No, that's all right. I'll take care of that. And really, the only reason, and this is nothing against Sergeant Major Coran or Eric Coran, is my first time meeting him, I sat down and he goes, "All right." And I had a guy sitting next to me. He goes, "Can you swim?" And I said, "Nope." And he's like, "Great, you're going to the dive team." And everything happened to me after that, and here I am doing this, talking to you. Nothing. That's the way we had a full company too. That's just where I went, down the hall to the dive team, and things didn't work out for me. But yeah, Eric's great, and Danny Orozco, he surprised me the other day, down in North Carolina. There's no way he knew who I was, and I walked up to him, and he knew my
yeah,
name. And
that's
I
how he
could
was.
not believe it.
Yeah, Danny was
I was
just
like, man,
people person.
I was like, there's no way he knows who I am. And I walked up and he knew my name. And I met him for half a second in like October of 2017, 16, when I was getting go to Crete. It was in like passing. That motherfucker knows my name. So he gets a lot of leeway just for that. I mean, very impressed. Very impressed. But all right. So, I guess moving forward, it doesn't matter how your career progression, but like how much say or looking levels down at the future force of selecting future sergeant majors do you have in your career?
So in selecting them, I don't necessarily have a lot, right? Like, it goes to a board the same way every promotion does. But what we do is talk about, like, hey, who are we looking at as the next first sergeants, right? And we do talent management boards. So try to make them as blind and as possible. We we look at their package, we base it on paper, because how else are you going to do it, right? Like, that's the Army's model of doing this, and so that's how we do it for those boards. First sergeants statistically will make sergeant major, right? Very, very few exceptions to that. So that's where we start. So by making a guy a first sergeant, you're basically making him a sergeant major. And then we compete talented individuals outside of the group in order to go and get their name out there to work in more challenging positions where they get developed. HRC being one of them, componency, 1SFC, USASOC, that sort of thing, right? So yeah, we have some say. We have some say on where we put these people. But since they've taken over, and I talk about this with my CSMs, is that like I do not make these decisions in a vacuum. I'll never vote a packet by myself because I get it wrong more than I want, right? Like I trust my judgment at a certain point, but I don't trust it 100%. So I've taken it away from the individual battalions to sit there and go, hey, this is going to be my next first sergeant, because we're humans, right? Nepotism creeps in. We have blinders on for the people that we like. Yeah, it's just the way that it is. And so I put it before all of us, and we sit there and we decide who the best candidates are for the next year's promotion, and we put them in. For sergeant majors, it's the same thing. I bring all the CSMs in and I say, hey, talk to me about your sergeant majors. What does their future hold? And if the CSM comes in and they're like, this guy's the next red medal CSM, I'm like, cool, man, that's awesome. What about this guy? He's like, he's also the next red medal CSM. I was like, oh, two of them in your one company. All right, that's pretty awesome. And then what about this guy? He's like, maybe USASOC. I'm like, fuck, man, I put too much talent in your battalion, clearly. Or you're biased, right? And so we've gotten away from like asking those kinds of questions. We're more like, hey, give me his strengths and weaknesses. Where can we apply talent? What does he need to work on? What can we do to better position him for the future? And what is his ultimate potential? And I force guys to be a bit more deliberate about it, as opposed to like, hey, I really like this guy. I think he's going to be the next regimental CSM. Like, hey, like maybe not too, right? Like, let's be honest with ourselves, because we want to sit there and like, they can't all be the next regimental CSM. They can't all be the next group CSM. So we have to be honest about who we're picking and putting up there. So direct, like at the end of the day, like if my 5 CSMs come to me and they go, hey, this is the guy, and I'm like, nope, hate that guy, don't want that guy, never going to happen. They'll never know it from me, right? And that guy will never know it from me, because at the end of the day, that does nothing for him in terms of, providing that confidence that they need to go into the next leadership position. I will keep my opinions to myself. I'll keep an eye on things, certainly, but I'm going to trust my subordinate leaders that they're picking the right dude. Because once again, my experience is my bias for that individual might, be wrong. So.
Okay. So a little bit, because 7 to 8 is all boards. Like there, you have nothing there, right? But if you wanted to push somebody to CSM, you give them a diamond.
Yeah, if you want to make them a sergeant major, you give them a diamond. Honestly, if you want to make them a platoon sergeant or an E8, you make them a platoon sergeant, right? And we do that through our T-step.
I've seen that where that doesn't work either. I've seen that where that doesn't work too as well.
If I were to sit there and if you were to give me examples of a guy who was a team sergeant, I have a guy, right?
Not on recording. Not on
recording. No. But
yeah.
What I'm saying is I can think of an example of a guy who was a team sergeant for me for 4 years, and for 4 years he was just killing it. He was a great team sergeant, right? He was an E7 all 4 years, and everybody asked him why. Like, how is this guy not getting promoted? How is this guy not getting promoted? And when I asked him, I'm like, hey, when's the last time he took a language test? And he's like, well, it was 2018. This is now 22, right? And I'm like, he's like, but I've been deployed, so I've been on the waiver. I'm like, that waiver doesn't count for promotion. It only counts for pay. And because he didn't have a language test for 4 years, it's not, once again, this isn't my opinion about the subject. That was enough to get him not promoted. And when you think of the margin of error, the amount of people that get promoted, about 10 to 14% for the regiment, you need to be nearly perfect when you get looked at, and you probably need to be in a team sergeant position also, right? And that's like, you can sit there and show that for years. So this dude who's been killing it, doing number 1 E7 in the company 4 years in a row, getting MQs, all the right things, just didn't take a language test. When he got promoted, though, was his last month in the position as a team sergeant after he took a language test. So, Like, yeah, there's examples of it, but those are the examples of like his leadership not looking out for him, myself included, because I was his company sergeant major, and I'm like, the first year he didn't get promoted, the second year he didn't get promoted. I was like, and then I wasn't his company sergeant major anymore, so there's not me passing the buck, and just like I fucked up too.
So that's perspective, right? Because again, at the team level, we don't see that shit. We just see, because I remember a list came out in 17 and everybody was flabbergasted that the people that were supposed to make 8 didn't make it. And we have no visibility on that. All we get is just bullshit rumors on the call. Oh, I got fucked, or this is just not my time, or, I guess it's time to retire and shit like that. So, but the paperwork will kill you. It really
I mean,
will.
yeah, it's like, I tell the guys this now. It's like, hey, the NCOER is for the board. It's not for the guy, right? Like, that's who you have to communicate with. And I did, since coming back from HRC, I've done triage on everybody's packet who will ask me to look at it and say, hey, why do you think I did or didn't get picked up? And I'll tell them. But it's not rocket surgery, man. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty quick to figure out, like, hey, what do you need to do to fix this for next year? Here's what you do, and then you fix it, and then they get promoted. And it's not like, and I don't have any answers. Like, I don't have a peek behind the curtain. I don't get to sit there. I have no influence with the DA Secretariat. I've just read enough NCOERs to know what they look like or what they should look like at the end of the day. And I've sat on board. And here's the thing: if nothing else, right? The board is made up of human beings who are sick of being at HRC after the second week. And if you sit there and lie to that board member, if you write a bunch of bullshit in there, he's going to know it and they're going to take it out on you. So make those things as succinct as possible and make them as accurate as possible, and tell me when you want this guy promoted, and they'll get promoted. It's as simple as that. But the flip side of that is, if you do that with all of the people on your ODA, then your fourth guy is going to get promoted over your first guy. And that's the trade-off. So you have to be honest about it, or we promote the wrong people.
Yeah. And it's crazy that it comes down to a sheet of paper with black and white of all the things you did or didn't do on there, and one NCOR by an illiterate team sergeant could fuck you for
Yeah,
years.
sadly, you are correct. However, if the company sergeant major is doing their job, that shouldn't be happening, right? Like, they should be able to sit there and, like, hey man, this is where a comma goes, and this is how you spell there in this context, right? I see that a lot. Yeah, I got a funny one with the Medal of Honor winners NCOER. I'll share with you offline, but
Has AI helped write or correct or anything, people's shortcomings on spelling or punctuation or grammar in writing these NCRs at all? Has it helped anyway that you
I don't
see?
know that it has, to be honest with you. I haven't seen it. It's not like, I mean, I'm sure I don't use chat GPT or anything like that. I'm sure if you were to sit there and be like, write an NCOER bullet that says this is the best guy in the world, I just feel like the board is going to sit there and see that and be like, this is just, it's almost too good. I Once again, I haven't seen it, but there's like when you build the NCOER, there's a spell check in it. So if you're misspelling things, if the grammar is wrong, it'll tell you. So there's really no excuse for it. I had a guy tell me this when I was young. I was in E5 and I was getting ready to PCS to the Q course. And this was this XO, he was a captain, and I needed an NCOER, and I was like, I'm good. I don't care, right? Because what the fuck do I know at this point, right? I didn't realize that I had to have an NCOER when I PCS. Okay. And he's like, yeah, man, you got to have one. You can't just not have one. I was like, oh, cool, write it. I don't care. I don't care what it says. I'm going to the Q course. What does this matter anymore, right? And then he gives it to me to sign, but there's errors on it, right? Like there's spelling errors and things like that. And I was like, yeah, whatever, dude, signed. Don't care. And he goes, no, you're gonna resubmit this. We're gonna redo it. We're gonna get it right. And I was like, why, dude? It doesn't matter, right? Like, I'm going to the Q course in E5. Who cares, right? I'll be fine. And he goes, because when a board looks at this, or when your next boss looks at this, all they're going to see is that your current center command didn't care enough about you to do it right, right? And that's all it needs to say. You can sit there and have the best bullets in the world. They can sit there and talk about how amazing this person is and quantifiable things. Tell me everything that I need to know about this individual. And if it's sloppy and it's misspelled and it's just lazy, that tells me everything about your raider and your senior raider, first of all. And it tells me that they don't care about you. That's the only conclusion I can draw, right? And then your company sergeant major also probably didn't care about you, or they're not doing their job. And that's enough of a snapshot to take a guy from being promotable to not. Like, you sit there and you look at a guy whose number OML is 500. His NCOERs probably don't look very different than a guy who's 300 or 700. But there's such a margin. Like, all these guys look almost exactly the same. But if you get a guy who's like 1100, his NCOERs look bad in a lot of cases, right? Look bad as in, like you said, they're lazy or they're not modified. They're just thumbed in, you know? And you can see what those bullets are. We call them fluff. But, so I don't know. Like, if somebody tells me one day, like years from now, to be like, hey, I used ChatGPT to rate this entire MCOER and this guy got promoted the first year, I'll be like, that's amazing, awesome. But eventually everybody's going to use ChatGPT and it's going to cancel each other out. So then we're not going to know who to pick.
I did have a company sergeant major tell me that he's using it for awards, and it really helps him out because he kind of it learns how to do it, and once he's got it where it wants it, he can just kind of plug and play.
Yeah, I think awards are a little bit different because the award that the guy gets, most of the guys are going to get it anyways, right? If you're putting a guy in for a Bronze Star or an MSM or something like that, you have a reason to do it. Now you just need somebody to help you articulate it. Versus you have an MCOER that, like, you're too lazy to write yourself. And you put it in there, and now all of a sudden this guy who's mediocre on an ODA becomes a team sergeant, and you have no one to blame but yourself, right? I would say that the consequences are more severe if they're not being deliberate about it. Now, if you want to use it to get a bump on the guy that you truly want to get promoted, then who am I to tell you no? But I don't know the efficacy of it.
As far as taking care of guys, what is this? What did he call it? Ghost platoon? Or once guys are about a year out from retiring or ETSing, you guys are pulling them out of the company. What's going on with that?
So it's called the Tory platoon at first group, right? Because the guy who I put in charge of it went into ChatGPT and said, come up with a clever name that has to do with first group, and I can do an acronym with it. And so this is what it came up with. And I don't know what it stands for. I just call it Tory platoon. But the idea is that these guys get reassigned to our HHC in order for them to transition more effectively, right? So, like, you have the SFL cap things that you have to do, but once they get within a year of their retirement, they're not deployable anymore, right? And especially if they're in a med board situation, they're not deployable. So what we're trying to do with these guys is give them some opportunities for to take care of themselves. One, to get all their medical stuff taken care of, to get some advice on financial. Like, one of the things that the guy who's in charge of it noticed is that, like, a lot of the people that were showing up were not prepared to get out of the Army, right? When that paycheck goes away, they weren't financially stable, they weren't emotionally stable, their marriages were, at best maintained, but not really. Like, once they had all this time to spend at home and they were, like, thinking about transition, they're no longer focused on the team, like, the wheels were coming off. So he started putting this program together to give them those resources, right? So we bring in people for job placement, how to write resumes, how to make sure that they're financially stable and the things that they need to do in order to prepare to get out. Getting in with our PA, our group PA goes in and does, like, a thorough, like, once over the world on the guys, gets them tested where they need to, gets them into programs if necessary, all in the effort to make sure that they transition out as effectively as possible, right? Because at the end of the day, we want these guys to live long and healthy lives afterwards, right? And it doesn't just go to our retirees, our ETS, our guys that are ETSing. They don't get the same amount of time, but they still get the same resources, so they can go over there and they can tap into the platoon sergeant, as it were. and he'll give them all the resources that they need. And we've briefed this now to everybody up to SOCOM, and it's getting a ton of traction. And the guys, the feedback that I'm getting from the platoon and the guys itself is like it has helped tremendously with preparing people for the next phase of their life. And the feedback that I'm getting from the platoon sergeant is like, hey man, these guys, like this guy when he showed up, a year, 6 months ago, whatever it was, to now is a different human being. I've never seen him, so like happy. Like the carefree may not be the right word, but like definitely, ready for that next evolution, as it were, versus, like when I left, or I had a guy leave my ODA and he just didn't leave, right? Like he was no longer on my books. He was, assigned to the beach because he was separating from the army within the next, however long. And all he did was hang out in our team room. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, if you want to hang out in the team room, just can you be my Charlie? And he's like, I just want to hang out. Right, dude. So that wasn't like we weren't setting him up for success, and I was enabling it, I guess. But like, so now we've made it a concerted effort to make sure that these guys are getting the counseling that they need. And at the end of the day, if they go into financial readiness stuff and they don't take anything from it, if they go in and talk to EBH and they don't take anything from it, we can't. At least we can say we've done our best to try to set them up for success. So I've talked to a lot of my peers about this. I don't know if we're like the furthest along with it, but I certainly think like we've put the most into it because I have a dedicated guy that I've assigned to making sure this happens. And he's the absolute right guy for it because he possesses that empathy and compassion, but he's also a phenomenal leader. To make sure that these guys are coming in and taking care of themselves. That's the hardest thing I've ever seen, right? Like communication is difficult. Getting Green Berets or people in this community to take care of themselves over the ODA or over the mission is like the hardest thing in the world. And so like to get them to separate from it, we got a solid individual in there that does just that. So.
And this is while you've been there, this came about, or
we've talked about it for years, but we finally got it like off the ground, maybe 6 months after I came in. And part of the problem was just like being able to resource and man it, like figuring that out was a challenge. But once again, I had a post team sergeant E8 who was willing to retire. He was willing to stay in long enough to sit there and like get this thing off the ground.
I love that. And it's, I say on here a lot that, the military doesn't care about you. It's the people that care about you. And you have a job to do, really. I mean, you have to make sure group works or you'll get fired and replaced with somebody else.
Maybe.
But also maybe not. But also, I mean, Green Berets were any special operations or any close-knit unit. There's a lot of, you care about the people that you work with and work for. And I don't know, that says a lot to shows that take care of the guys going out, because those opinions and what we say is even more amplified now going forward. Like people, I don't know why people listen to what I say, and I'm very careful of what I do say and try and put out there of the things I say about certain people and about opinions about things. And I like to hear that. It makes me feel good about the direction that regiment's going and taking care of the guys, because it fucking sucks getting out. I did not deal with it very well. And I know a lot of my friends, I would say every enlisted guy that's come on this show probably has not done well with it.
Yeah, I mean, you start drinking more, you don't have purpose anymore. You start hitting the bottle at noon or whatever, right? Like, I joke with my wife about this, but like, if I had nothing to get up in the morning for, I would sit there and just like start playing video games and do nothing with the rest of my day. So even after this, I have to find something to do. And if I didn't have that, like, get up. If I didn't have some reason to get up every day and like go to a place and do a thing or like that provided me some purpose, like I wouldn't work out and I wouldn't do, and I know this about myself. So I set myself up for success by, I think anyways, we'll see. I mean, time will tell. I'll be on your show a year from now and I'll be fucking shell of my former self. Hopefully not, but the, like knowing myself well enough that, hey, like I have to have something. I'll probably die working, and that's okay with me because that's what keeps me going. That's okay. Hopefully, I find something that I enjoy doing, and it gives me the reason to get up and go to the gym and to sit there and do the stuff with the family, and like find the motivation to, keep giving it my all every day or whatever it is. But yeah, and that's exactly what Tim saw, was like guys that lacked that purpose and then that transitioned and didn't do it the right way. That's what they found, is they struggled on the outside. They struggled before they got out. People saw it, but like, what can you do? So we made an effort to combat that, and it wasn't my idea. Like my successors, we've been talking about it at the level for years. It was just, I was fortunate enough that when I came into the position, things fell into place that we were able to do it. I mean, we could have forced it, but maybe I got the right guy in that. But I'm pretty fortunate to say that we were able to get it off the ground and make it a success so far. So
Yeah, it's not going to help everybody. Some guys still will push it aside, and as I've said on here quite a few times, we can't catch everybody. We can't do everything for everybody, but if we do just the best we can, or even try to get the best we can't do the best all the time, but we can help a lot more people, and at least stop somebody from making that split-second decision, and a decision they can't take
sure.
back. And,
Yeah.
so that's good. So, but you said, you're going to have to do something. Have you reached the end of your road, or are you just done? Like, cause I mean, the higher you go, it's a big triangle, right, or a big funnel, right? And there's only so many seats after this one. Are you just done? I mean, you got to be at 30 years now.
No,
right?
I'm at 26 this year. I'm at 26 this year. So I have a couple more years.
26?
I mean, I could keep
Okay.
going if I wanted to do the nominative level, I guess, because then at that point, there's no cap in my age or my time in service. But I don't know that I'd find anything as interesting, right? And like, as me and my wife talk about it and what we want to do, and like be able to travel and spend more time with the kids, go someplace that we want to live. I'm not a big fan of the state that I've been in for 20 years. And if they don't pick the I-5 shit, I imagine that there's going to be some catastrophic incident that's going to take place. But it's, every step higher, right, is further away from the people that I would ultimately serve, and the less interaction you get with them. And I don't know that would be any fun going to the next level. And then the higher you go, the more complaints you hear, right? So there comes a certain point where it's like, hey, it's almost like you can't do anything right. And I don't know if my morale can take that for another however many years. So if I can end on a high note and still have the like I'm still pretty put together, and go and transition into something else that I find rewarding, then great. And maybe I stay within the community in some capacity. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm that's I say it's a problem for future Bill, because right now I'm focused on what I'm doing, and then a year from now when I'm done doing this, I can focus on what I'm doing next.
Well, I mean, look at Danny. He just came in to pick something up from group, and now he's the VSO for GBF
Right.
over there. So
Yeah.
shit like that
Yeah.
happens. So where do you think group is going? Like, is this production? What did you use the word? Production. Do you see that leveling out, or do you see that continuing to decline, and just group is going to have to adapt? And is this part of, because you said, I mean, 3,500 GBs when 9/11 happened ish, and is this just the right sizing of the organization naturally?
Perhaps, right? Like, if we get down to something that's manageable, a couple of years ago, I asked the question to Proponency, who's the one that they run our numbers, right? Like they say, hey, this is how many people we need for production. This is how many people we need to enter the Q course, recruiting, all this stuff. They come up with the data. And then they say, in order to maintain a regimen at its current strength, you need to graduate this many people. I said, okay, well, where we are right now is not at 100%. So what do we need to maintain the strength of today, right? And they said, all right, well, instead of 550, it'll be 450. And then it'll keep the regiment at this percentage. But every time it goes down more, you need less people in order to maintain the current status quo. That's no growth, right? That's just like next year it'll be 350 to maintain whatever percentage we're at as a regiment. That's not where we want to be. If that's where we get to, that's where we get to, right? But the next war kicks off and maybe they ramp up production the same way that they did at the beginning of GWAT and throughout, right? Like throughout the GWAT, we graduated more people. Is it because we lowered the standards? I don't know. I can tell you that I'm a product of it. They were building, like when they were growing. I was there under leadership that was, that's what they said. It's like, we have to graduate this many people, even despite whatever things that they do. I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm just saying that that's the reflections of that time. So we'll adapt. If tomorrow we don't continue to grow, these are the repercussions of that. Is that we'll continue to lose ODAs. But right now, if right now with the people that we've selected, we'll graduate a year from now. So a year from today, we will not graduate more than 300 people. That's just the way that it is, right? So what do? That's how many ODAs, that they aren't coming to the regiment. If we don't do something, we'll just continue to fall, or we'll continue to decline, and we'll adapt to it, or we make some changes that still maintain the standards of the organization so that we can do our job. Like we find those right people that can still be Green Berets, and we figure out what that looks like, and then we get back to a level that is sustainable, right? I would hate to see it go down to 4 teams per company, but maybe that's where we are in the future. But I can tell you, optimistically, the next selection class is going to be the biggest one we've had, and I think the last 5 years is what the SORB folks told us, which is great, right? SORB is adapting the way that they're targeting, folks on the conventional forces. The guys out on the street are recruiting ATN X-rays and hopefully advertising us for what we do, not what we did in the height of GWAT, because we don't want coming here and then becoming disenfranchised. But I can tell you this, at this point, no one's admiring the problem anymore. Decisions are being made so that we can at least address it, and whether or not it gets after the problem or it solves it entirely, no one's sitting back anymore and being like, hey, let's see what happens, right? Like things are going to happen. Changes will be made. People will be upset by it. People will be thrilled by it. And the world will keep on spinning, and the group will keep adapting to whatever is coming. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully we do grow. That would be ideal. I like having more Green Berets, not less. So.
Well, that's good. That's good. So everybody who can make a decision is well aware of what's going on.
Yes.
And they're working accordingly.
Yeah, I can say that with confidence, is that this is being discussed at the decision-making level at this point. So.
Because you I won't hit on this too much, but just as a soldier, you hear leadership say stuff and you go, bullshit, but this is something that you can't ignore. Like it can't. Like they're not saying these things to blow smoke up people's asses. Like, no, okay, we're working on it, and I'm hearing some other things that SWIC is doing with some people and even I recognize, like my peers, God, they were, the guys that are running these training or special operations training programs on the civilian side, they're recruiting
Sure.
guys,
yeah,
and convincing them to go to selections too and things. So there's this whole, pre-enlistment and during the enlistment thing that's going on now, and with social media. And I hope that the right people do things the right way for the right reasons going forward. I hope that is the case.
I tell you, if they're not, I can tell you it's not for the wrong reasons. It's simply because, like, I mean, once again, we're all human. We all have our opinions based on our experiences and our our mentors and all the things that make us who we are. And but we don't always get it right, you know. So like we might try 50 different things before we finally figure it out. But I can tell you, every mistake we make along the way is well intentioned. It's with the intent of, even when we were getting smaller, the intent wasn't to sit there and make the regiment smaller in order to make it harder on ODAs. The intent was to sit there and, keep the standard, whatever that was, right? Or the perceived standard. So once again, well intentioned, maybe not the proper execution, or maybe it's not the right answer for the organization. But I do believe that everybody who does this, like who they're invested, man. The cadre at Swift are invested. Like they believe in what they're doing. The groups, the companies, the team sergeants, they're invested. But there's a disconnect someplace, right? Like the team sergeants, my team sergeants, they've gone to briefings before with the CGs and the people who make decisions. They said, hey, we'll take on more risk. I'll take on a guy I need to train a little bit more, right? Maybe not a private, private level, just learned how to do his laundry a week ago, but, somebody who makes good decisions and can be trained, I'll take that guy, you know? So whereas before, like I said, when I was a team sergeant, man, that wasn't always the case. There were times where in fact, Danny Roth was the one that sat there and told me one day, because I told him, I was like, hey, this guy coming to the team, I don't want him. He's too much of a headache. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to take him, Bill, but at the end of the day, man, you're passing that responsibility off to somebody else. And he guilted me into it. I ended up taking him. He ended up being a really good dude. But I never would have learned that otherwise, right? And that's the things that, like I hope we pass on. But we can sit there and work a little harder to make sure that the next generation, is able to lead off of the future. Same way I was. Like I said, man, I was not. At this point, like as I look at the selection standards and what they're doing out there, I'm like, the guys who get passing, I don't know that I passed selection. I don't know if 24-year-old Bill would have passed selection as it stands today. But I mean, I can't say that definitively, but shit, I mean, I can tell you that the standards have gotten more difficult.
I had one of the guys on here. He said, "Can you pass?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I thought about it, and I called him a couple of days later, and I went, "My feet couldn't
Yeah,
pass.
43-year-old Bill
No,
couldn't pass. That's for
my
sure.
feet aren't." Physically, I could do it, everything, but my feet, no, they're not ready. I would need months to get my feet ready to go to selection. I'd be so fucked up from that. But I don't know. I like to think I can do it, and I like to think I can do it right now. And if anybody listening can give me a fresh Social Security number, I will sign up tomorrow. But I cannot. I think we could, dance around, and I could try and remember some more stuff about what I wanted to say, but we'll see how this is received by a
Sure.
group, and I'm sure people will let me know the other things they want to ask me, and I'm not going to ask you the things that they want me to, because that has no place on my show, and I think you know what I mean, and we're not going to talk
Fair
about
enough.
that. But we'll go through the questions here. I got a bonus question at the
Okay.
end, and then we'll cut you loose, and we'll see how things go. But what is your response to thank you for your service?
It's usually an awkward thank you back. I've still never gotten quite comfortable with that. And it's because I love my job, right? Like I never thought of this as service. The Army's given me way more, I think, than I've given it. And so it's like when somebody says thanks for the service, I'm like, this is the best job in the world. And I've said that for years, right? Like being a film sergeant was amazing. Being a guy on an ODA was amazing. And every step since then, I've had a great experience. So it's just kind of weird. So I'm like, well, thank you for your service. I don't know what the fuck to say. Yeah.
What is the one characteristic that sets operators apart from the conventional forces?
Well, so it's that willingness, I think, to put themselves out there and try to do something that other people wouldn't. I think it's two things. It's that certainly, right? Like I was just at a selection graduation. I thought it was amazing. Like those guys, those kids out there, right? And the kids to me, because they're half my age at this point. But the willingness to sit there and raise their hand and give something that they know is
Lost you. Bill's recording
Oh,
will
I got
continue
you.
on a new track. Great. You still there?
Yeah. To maybe my headphone died.
God, we should have been on this the whole time.
I can keep it out.
Whole,
Does this work better for you?
well, now, yeah, but yeah, I can hear it. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Yeah, so it's that willingness to give something that's not a guarantee a try, right? Like, because I mean, honestly, that is the thing that separates them, right? Because all the guys who didn't go for it, maybe it's they didn't want to, right? Like this doesn't appeal to them, and that's true. But there's a lot of guys out there who would love to be a Green Beret who just aren't willing to raise their hand and put themselves out there, right? Um, and then the other part of it is like we do have a ton of autonomy. Even as an E6, I have way more responsibility than I ever did as a squad leader in the infantry to sit there and make decisions, and be out there on my own. And they're treated like adults and they act like it 99% of the time, right? And they do right by the organization. I don't think the regular army has that luxury. So, but once again, we assess for that. We assess for that and we train that into people, right? And then we tell them like, hey, this is what we expect of you, and they rise to the occasion. So,
All right. I know you got a little bit left, but what is the one moment of your career that you wish you could go back and relive or redo, and it wouldn't change where you are now?
so like I look back on it and like um, when I sit there and I think about like where I had the most effect on the organization was at HRC. At the individual level, people who called me and truly needed help, I was able to help, and I had the ability to do it. That's the weirdest thing, right? Like as a group CSM, I can help people. There's certainly that, right? And I'm able to, but the being able to sit there and touch all 5 groups and the 2 training groups and everything like that. And when a dude called me who was a complete stranger, I could sit there and be like, yeah, man, and I could make an effort to do life changing like actions for this individual was like it was wildly rewarding, right? If I had to do something again, honestly, I would go back down to the battalion and I'd spend more time with ODAs. You sit there and you tell yourself, you're like, hey, I'm going to get out next week and I'm going to get out next week and I'm going to get out next week. And then one day I wasn't the battalion CSM. And I'm like, fucking squandered my ability to do it. Now I'm the group CSM and you're thinking like, oh, you could just go do it now. And it's like I said, it's just I compete with a calendar that I don't control. So it's harder. But that's what I would have done differently.
What's the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Um, that's tough. It's kind of like what I talked about before is like, um, you know, possessing or learning that empathy. I don't know if it's advice necessarily. Like I can't come up with like a snippet for this, but having somebody teach me what empathy was, um, and yeah, I think it made me a better leader. Being able to sit there and like understand why people make the decisions that they make and doing what they do allowed me to sit there and better mentor them and better, better lead, I think. And without that, I was not in the infantry. I was not an empathetic leader. I was just like my predecessor before me. I was just an asshole, and I yelled and I scuffed Joe up and I did all the things that happened to me because that's how I thought you led, right? Until I got somebody who actually said, hey, this is why this guy is doing this. This is why he fucked up today. And I was like, oh, it was eye opening to me. And over time, I had more and more of that in my experience, and that was the thing that made me, I think, effective. Um, so I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's the best I can give.
No, it does. And then last one, well, and then we got the bonus round, but, I guess when you were operational, so what were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
So afraid of then was leaving the ODA, right? Like you hold on tight as best you can. You never want to leave, no matter what. And it worked out for me. I was on an ODA for 10 straight years, from the time I was a junior echo to the time I was a team sergeant. And I tell people this, like you couldn't mirror your career after mine because I got lucky in so many ways, right? Like I got stabilization when I went to the Fox course, and I got stabilization again when I made team sergeant. All these things happened at the absolute perfect time. Um, and that was it. I was afraid of change. And then, unfortunately, it wasn't until, like I said, I went to HRC. I left the battalion the only battalion I'd ever known. And I was terrified of it. It ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of like my own professional development and, getting to spend time at home, things like that. It was great. And so now my biggest fear is like, is the what's next. But man, I really don't want to like die of cancer 2 years after I get out of the army and not be able to collect that retirement check for the rest of my days. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, God. Yeah.
it's like staying in good enough shape and keeping my body healthy long enough to reap the benefits, and not just for me, but like for my family, like that, because I know guys, unfortunately, that have passed not long after they got out. And I don't know if it's the slowing down or whatever, but like, that's what keeps me motivated. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta
I
I
know
gotta
what you
stick
mean.
around long enough that they can reap the benefits of this because they've sacrificed too, right? I don't want to leave them like that.
No, I got you there. I'm not afraid of anything like realistically, but I am afraid of not getting all my money out of the VA. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'd be
I want
so
them. It's
mad
mine.
if like I check out in a couple of years. I'm like, God damn it, those bastards
Yeah,
got me.
yeah.
All right, bonus one. I was sitting here thinking about halfway through. I went, it's possible. It's possible that future group sergeant major will listen to this. What would you say to them?
Huh. Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully, I'm talking to my group, my future group CSMs. You know, at my group, right? Like, I'd like to believe one of them is going to be my successor. Um, and just it- you know, s- something that I had the luxury of before I took my battalion job was the time to sit there and think about what I wanted to do. Um, and with that time, I was able to sit there and like have a goal in mind, right? Of the things I wanted to get off the ground. And when I took this job, I wasn't expecting it at the time that I took it. And so part of the problem was in my first 6 months was pretty stressful because it was like I didn't have those things, right? That I wanted to get off the ground, the things I could focus on. I was treading water. So what I would tell anybody who's going into the next level of leadership is think about spend some like deliberate time, whether that's with by yourself or like jotting it down on a piece of paper, or like I use my mental strength coach at group. Um, and she helps me tremendously in being able to kind of craft that idea or like take whatever like jumbled ideas I have in my head and make it something that I can actually do. Um, that gives me focus when I'm not just answering emails. It gives me a goal. Um, and it also gets me like, hey, this is what I need to do in order to execute that. So like if I have to prepare myself or I have to learn something, right? Like those are the things that I think have made me somewhat successful here is that, I had that time to reflect and think about what the next thing is going to be like. Because man, drinking from a fire hose is the worst part of any job that I've ever taken, and it's usually because of a lack of preparation, at least from my experience. So
Okay. I like it. And fuck, man, I am honored that you reached out to me and sit down with me. I hope the sound comes out. I hope that people uh, just it says I enjoyed this immensely, just like I enjoyed everybody that comes to my show. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sitting down.
yeah,
And
I appreciate the
I
opportunity.
feel like I got something as a junior soldier, even though I'm not. Uh, I still like to do my best for regiment. So I got a lot out of this, and I thank you for coming on the show, and hopefully other people do as well. So we'll see
Yeah,
how it's
thanks a
received.
lot. Yeah, hopefully,
Absolutely.
like I said, hopefully I reach somebody. If anything else, they learned how to write an NCOER to some degree. So
Or that, and if not,
email me.
there will be yeah, send you an email and you will square them away. So we'll go to the lobby here in a second. So, but I appreciate you coming on. Bye, everybody.